I'll call to order the City Council of Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee. First, I'd like to welcome Councilor McKnight, who's here joining us. Councilor Litland has stepped off this committee, and we have Councilor McKnight joining us, so welcome. And next, I will entertain a motion on our agenda.
I would move the approval of the minute of the agenda as posted.
I will second that. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. And next we have,
Barlow,
yes,
there was an interest among the public to just do brief introductions, if that would be friendly to you, otherwise.
you mean about the meeting format?
Just the, who's at the table and who are the members that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that option.
No,
So I guess I'll start. I'm Mark Barlow. I'm the North District City Councilor and the chair of this committee.
I'm Gene Bergman, Ward 2 City Council.
Mayor Broderick, Ward 8 City Councilor.
Echo Ward 6.
thank you.
Okay. Very good. Well then, continuing right along, next I take a motion on adoption of our minutes from our March 25th.
I would move the adoption of the minutes as presented.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the minutes indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That's also unanimous. And I will now just take just a very, very brief moment to say that normally we have public comment at this point in our agenda. But we have Planning Director Charles Dillard with us tonight, and he has another commitment at 6:30. So to make sure that we had enough time for him to give us a presentation and ask questions, we're doing him ahead of public comment. So that's why we're doing that. And also just as a setup for that, you know, we were hoping that tonight we have an update on the city's transportation plan, but that's not ready for us yet. But Director Dillard is bringing us an overview of the current TDM ordinance, along with some comments on how it's working and how it might not be working, and some indication of what we might need to do to improve it and change it to implement some of the city's TDM rules. Is that accurate? And with that,
That's accurate.
I will turn it over to you for an overview.
There. Also, just want to say Scott Gustin is our development review team and permanent inspections here as well. So Scott's really the one maintaining, enforcing our current TDM ordinance. So I think I'm gonna give an overview, like Mark said, of our existing TDM regulations. Talk a little bit about what the plan recommends in terms of forming that, but really focus the latter part of this on challenges and issues that Scott and his team have identified in the current maintenance and enforcement and administration of our TDM ordinance, which will hopefully identify areas that we can address in an amendment. And I think the plan is to bring an amendment, a draft amendment for new TDM regulations to an upcoming TEUC meeting as early as the next TEUC meeting in May. So without further ado, also just want to begin this by making clear here in the bold red text here that there's no plans at this time to implement action step 3 of strategy R5, which is updating the residential parking permit program. The third action step is the one that recommends that the city study areas with the RPP program and areas where there's not 75% uptake, the city consider selling permits to nearby employers. So that, again, that item is not being considered at this time, and would only be considered after future and further community engagement. That is not what we're here tonight to talk about. So what we are here to talk about.
Sure.
I just want to pause there because I know there are folks in the room and could you go back one slide? Just to be really clear about this, because I've gotten a lot of questions and there's a lot of stress in the community about this. So I just want to underline that even though this is in the, or just reflect back what I think you just said, which is even though that this is in the report, it's not something that's moving forward, and it wouldn't move forward unless there was sort of another step in the process to say, hey, we're taking this piece of the report and we're acting on it.
That's right.
Is that right? Okay.
That's right. And I would say that's probably also true for any of the strategies.
Great. So if folks are worried about that, is it safe to say that there's nothing to worry about right now?
There's nothing to worry about right now. We will make sure that everybody is aware if we do re-engage on this topic, but I do not foresee TEUC or our office or the planning commission or council taking any actions on this particular action.
Can you say a clarification?
And can I just say that, and that, just to get Director Spencer's confirmation that because resident parking is under the authority of the commission, that there won't be any work done in the commission as well, consistent with this process.
Very knowledgeable, Councilor Bergman.
I dealt with this program for
Yes,
20 years.
We are coordinated among the departments and we understand the consternation on this recommendation. And if we were to ever pick it up either through the commission's interest or staff's interest, there would be a broad notification of it. I have not heard any interest from the commission or my staff to bring this forward.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so what we are here tonight to talk about is updating and expanding Burlington's TDM requirements, which is the very first recommendation in this regulations and plans toolkit. The two action steps here are to begin drafting a points-based TDM ordinance. We talked a little bit about that at two meetings ago, and we'll certainly bring a draft amendment that reflects that in May.
Excuse me, what's TDM? Does that stand for?
Thanks. Transportation demand management, which probably doesn't help you too much. It is actually all of the non-infrastructural programs and services that the city or region might provide to make it easier for folks to move around the city, particularly not in cars. So programs and services, things like, the bike share or car share or incentives or subsidies to do all of these things. Education is a big TDM tool. So it's all of the things except building the roads and sidewalks and bike paths that make it easy for us to move bike. The second action step is once the ordinance is finalized, begin developing TDM program guidelines to support successful implementation. The most successful TDM programs in the country are coupled with a really rigorous public education toolkit as well. And so we intend on creating that kind of work. These next few slides are a summary of our current TDM rules. Those rules reside in Article 8, which is our parking section. Specifically, this is section 8.1.16 TDM. So the purpose here, again, is to require the implementation of TDM programs for development projects in our city. The TDM rules do notably only apply to new development and only some new development, not all new development. The goals of the TDM are to advance the city's land use and transportation plans, promote public health, safety, welfare, and protection of the environment. And then these 4 bullets here. So reducing parking demand is a big TDM goal, reducing car ownership and the vehicle miles traveled that are associated with that, single occupant vehicle usage and congestion on the city streets, and ultimately, finally, increasing transit use and non-motorized travel. So that's all in the ordinance stated goals of the ordinance. So this is how our TDM rules are applied today. So you'll see these 3 columns: applicable, affordable, and small projects. So the applicable projects are the ones that have the most rigorous TDM standards applied to them. So these are projects that create 10 or more dwelling units or non-residential or mixed-use developments with, larger building footprints. Affordable projects have some TDM rules or standards applied to them, but largely they are exempted from the most rigorous standards. And then the small projects, so 5 to 9 units, have just one of the TDM standards. The outreach and education. So this is required for all applicable and affordable projects. So that first column, 10 or more units or non-residential or mixed use projects of scale. So each project has to designate a transportation coordinator who directly or indirectly, usually through partnership with the Transportation Management Association. In our case, this is CATMA, which is an area of TMA. And that coordinator is responsible for these 3 things here. So just making sure that all residents or employers at the workplace are informed and educated about their options in terms of moving around Burlington. That might include information about the bus network, about car share, about any bike or pedestrian programs and services. A travel survey has to be conducted to all residents and employees to understand their own behaviors and their preferences, and record keeping and reporting to the city upon request of all the TDM activities that are offered and rates of participation, including parking utilization or the amount of parking that is being used in a project. The TDM strategies, so this is required for applicable projects only. In addition to on-site bike parking requirements, each program has to have at least 2 of the following, 2 of these bullets here, 2 of these letters. So maintain an ongoing membership in a TMA. So CATMA, if you're not familiar with CATMA, they are the sort of link between our TDM ordinance and ultimately the users. So they are providing the education, and many times they are managing the services that are part of not only our TDM tools, but also those that are in place in Winooski and South Burlington and other communities in Chittenden County. B, providing GMT transit passes to all residents and employees at a minimum discount of 50%. Free car share membership, free bike share membership. Of course, we no longer have a bike share program today. That may change. And if not already provided through TMA membership, provide residents and employees with shuttle service, guaranteed ride home program, or ride to a nearby transit center. Guaranteed ride home programs, these are programs where, let's say you are an individual who likes to take the bus to work, but maybe your shift ends after your bus route ends for the day. And so the guaranteed ride home project, or for some reason your bus fails to come and you miss your bus, the guaranteed ride home program is essentially that. It's a service that guarantees that you can get a ride home through the management association or your employer. That's the case. Parking management. So this applies to applicable projects and partially to small projects. So where on-site or off-site parking is also made available, a parking utilization study, at least annually for a period of 7 years has to be conducted. With the exception of permanently affordable housing units, the cost of parking needs to be unbundled from all residential and non-residential leases and deeds. That is required of all small projects. That is the one that is required of all small projects out of these. And finally, where parking spaces are made available to off-site users, they must be made available by a renewable lease, provided the term of any lease does not exceed 1 year. So this batch is required for applicable projects, partially to small projects as well. So parking, priority parking spaces. So when on-site parking is provided, these following must be located in closest proximity to a primary building entrance or public street frontage. Accessible spaces, ADA accessible spaces, bicycles, scooters, and motorcycle spaces, car share spaces. And there's the, the stipulation here that one space must be offered for projects with 20 or more units, subject to an agreement with the car share provider. And finally, carpool or van pool vehicles. The TDM agreement, so this is the fourth one, this applies to all applicable projects and affordable projects. Each TDM plan has to include a signed commitment by the developer or the manager of the property acknowledging that each of the steps here is being provided. So commitment to ongoing implementation of the TDM requirements, acknowledgement project has no claim to the ongoing availability of nearby on-street public parking. Acknowledgement that the failure to maintain the TDM practices is a violation of ordinance, and finally, a commitment to notify future or subsequent owners of the obligation under the TDM rules. So review and enforcement. So this is where Scott and his team come in. The administrative officer is responsible for determining compliance with the TDM program today. Administrative officer Scott. Notably here, the consultants for the TDM plan really underscored the recommendation that we and any other city that wants to have a successful TDM program really needs to have a full-time TDM coordinator. It's a lot of work. Scott about some of the challenges, and I think it is in the plan recommending that the city create a full-time TDM coordinator position. I think that is a medium to longer term goal of ours, considering current challenges the city has in budgeting. But we're also, I would say, exploring in conversations with our regional partners, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, also the cities of Winooski, Essex Junction, Town South Burlington, about regional coordination. And it actually is a recommendation in our current plan, comprehensive plan BTV, to stand up regional TDM coordination. And this is something that I will encourage remains in our comp plan, and that we work in the coming years to possibly standardize across the region and coordinate enforcement across the region. So I'm gonna turn it over to Scott now, just to identify some of the challenges administering and enforcing Burlington's TDM regulations.
Very quick plug, or well, Charles made the plug, but I'll agree. Regional TDM, Burlington, South Burlington, and Winooski all have their own independent TDM programs, yet we share a transportation network. A lot of sense to get something regionally coordinated there, whether through CATMI and or the RDC. Anyhow, so Burlington currently has 17 TDM projects. 3 of those projects have certificates of occupancy, and 2 of them are reporting. That's the Nest and what is it? City West. And that's our Champlain. The third one with a certificate of occupancy is the Cox project on Main Street and doesn't have reporting requirements because it's 100% affordable. Cambrian Rise did a project-wide amendment a few years back, and that wrapped them into the TDM requirements. And so they are first in Illinois, subject to those requirements, and received the CO last July. So their year deadline to start producing annual reports is this coming July. So out of 17, we have 4 in the box so far. So a couple of things have come up, and it's unsurprising that we have some wrinkles to iron out once we actually get to implement this. So we have annual parking count reports. Okay, great. So I received 2 reports. And they demonstrate the TDM measures that are being undertaken. And they demonstrate that on-site parking for both projects, even though it's less than what used to be the parking minimum. In no event are they actually hitting 100% capacity. They're getting close. I want to say Plain Street got as high as like 75. That Champlain Street, I want to say it got as high as 94. But they're managing it is the punchline. So I think we would be well served, or for applicants would be well served if we provide a little more guidance, whether it's in the ordinance or a guidance sheet to flesh out in a little more detail how many parking counts we want to see. Do we want to see 4 within a 12-month period, 1 in a, are there particular seasons or times of day that we want to look at? I'm inclined to think that stuff would work better in a guidance outside of the ordinance, but yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think it would work better outside of the ordinance with those sort of details. The couple of reporting projects are providing car share, for instance. There is question around, okay, so do the residents reach out to car share directly? And we the permittee reimburse them? Do we have an on-site coordinator? That's less than car share, or DMT, or the case may be. And the users, the ordinance doesn't say that. And we received some questions from the providers and CAPA saying, gee, how are we supposed to make this work? Again, it's details I think we can get work to figure out a little more detail in our guidelines for that. And that segues into, so what sort of proof do we need that folks are continuing their relationship with GMT or car share? And what does that relationship look like? Interestingly, CATMA is the only available transportation management association, and they actually did the report for 77 Pine Street, and they will do the report for Camden Rise. But according to CATMA, they don't manage or administer car share or GMT programs, the requests of those entities. So follow-up conversation with everyone in the room seems to be warranted. As Charles noted, the free bike share membership is no longer available. It might become available again, but that brings me back to an earlier point. I think some of the details are better outside of the ordinance. Since this is in the ordinance right now, you can't do it. That's an option. But I cover it.
I think so next steps here, our office will coordinate with TPI, TPW, CATMA, and the TDM service providers in drafting the proposed amendment that will first come to you all, and then ultimately we'll go through the normal process where it goes from planning commission and then city council for adoption. And that we anticipate that will happen in the summer, with adoption ultimately in late summer or early fall this year. So that I think concludes our slides. I will stop sharing and happy to answer any questions or provide any other feedback.
Questions from the committee?
In terms of there being a change to the ordinance, the clarity that is being requested, a change to the ordinance versus administrative regulations or guidances, it would be, I think, and I'm just quickly zipping through the zoning ordinance, exceedingly important for us to have the authority expressly written in the zoning ordinance to be able to make those guidances. I do think we probably have some inherent authority, but there are limits to that. And when it gets to be substantive changes, and I would think that, you know, annual reporting, and if you're gonna do it more than once, is perhaps a substantive change unless you've identified, you know, you've got the authority to make those changes, or at least that clarification in rules. And even that, you know, we could have issues. So when we're looking at this, I think we should be conscious of that and making sure that those authorities are there, because I do believe that the process of changing the ordinance every time you need to clarify something is, in legal term, use the legal term, stupid. Right, so I think we should not go there. On the other hand, there are points where we're actually making substantive changes and we cross a line, and we just need to be really clear about that. But I would support trying to do this through guidances where possible, and then having it done in the ordinance where necessary. And let me just end by saying a redrafted ordinance still needs to have enough flexibility, and that's what we built in here. I mean, I think the people are like, okay, tell us what to do, but in fact, we built this, and I know because I wrote it, you know, we're not gonna tell you what to do because you got some choices and you get to choose. So on the other hand, having a guidance that really lays out when people are making these choices, how that all's gonna work, how you are gonna look at them. You know, that's very much what rules are for. So I think that having the people in the room to really sort of work through the mechanics, all of those pieces will be very, very helpful, so that we can then identify them. We can see at what point we may be getting too close to the line of an ordinance change, and we've got to go there. So that is sort of my general thing. I was expecting there to be a horror show of, you know, the parade of horribles in terms of the implementation, but there isn't. And thank you. Okay.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this all correctly, because it seems like what you're proposing here is really just tweaks that will help everything go more smoothly versus changes that will fundamentally change how this is working. Like, for example, you're not changing the chart of which projects are required to participate, or, you know, can you just walk us through sort of what you're asking for that's like make things go more smoothly and make sure the subscriptions are working and hiring a person to do it versus like what will people sort of feel, what will be more substantive?
Yeah.
Like Jean mentioned, the annual reporting versus quarterly reporting, that would be maybe substantive, but is there other stuff that we should have our attention brought to?
Yeah, and again, like, because we haven't started actually drafting the amendment, we don't know, but I would say actually it's very likely that that chart applicable for one small projects is very much subject to change.
Okay.
I think part of the challenge is that TDM, you know, you've only seen a few projects come through the city, and part of this is just because of the lack of development in the city, but only a few projects have the TDM program applied to it today. And I think that we acknowledge that we need to have the programs and services the TDM offers more broadly available to the community. That's why we focused in this plan on neighborhood TDM and what that looks like in a diffuse neighborhood, community, very small landlords and small apartment buildings. That neighborhood TDM may be addressed in the table. There may be tools that are required in various small developments. We don't know yet, and there will be a public engagement process through TEUC, the Planning Commission Council to any of that. So yeah, that could change. The actual menu of options is going to change. So in Burlington today, we have 5 or so potential tools that you can select. You've got to select 2 of them, and the trend is actually a really long menu, having options to create a lot of flexibility. I was just glancing, South Burlington and Winooski. You know, they've got, Winooski has probably, it's probably a dozen or 18 potential tools that you can select from. South Burlington has quite a few more, and categories of tools, so that will change. The administration part, I think, will change, but I think, as Jean noted, where we make some of these decisions, whether they reside in ordinance or in guidelines, it's decided. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a fairly significant revision of the existing TDM.
Okay, well, I'm glad I asked that question because I didn't get that from what we talked about
Yeah,
before.
and-
So I think it's important to just frame it up, like when we're having these discussions. You know, is this going to be a super impactful process for folks? And I mean, I think all the changes you just mentioned sound great. Like there are so many things we could add to the list, but so that's great to know. But I think it would be good to sort of like lead with that as we talk to more, you know, all these other groups that you mentioned.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I will also just add that South Burlington's new TDM ordinance was adopted late last year. Winooski is currently working on theirs, so it's not quite adopted yet. There are a lot of similarities between those two communities, and we are also going to make sure that our TDM ordinance is generally consistent with what's being done in the region. We certainly don't want to establish standards that are far more rigorous in Burlington than what our neighbors are doing. But we also want to, in Scott's point about regional coordination, set us up for in the coming years where we are able to better coordinate TDM regionally, that it's easy for sea surface or TDM to do that. You know, if our ordinances are all at least fairly.
Yeah, I think that's really smart.
Anything else? I had a question about the role of a TDM coordinator in maybe rolling out, like Jean had said, like there's a menu of things that you can choose from if you're trying to be compliant, but would a TDM coordinator be like a resource for folks that were subject to TDM ordinances? And then on the other side, when we're talking about the reporting requirement for compliance, would the TDM coordinator be someone who would be managing
All of
that? And so that's my question.
Yeah.
And so you're saying yes. So would the need for a TDM coordinator sort of would we need a TDM coordinator before we could maybe work concurrent with some of the changes with?
In a perfect world, yeah, we have a TDM coordinator around adopted a new ordinance or many of the actual recommendations of the action plan, but I would recommend that we don't let that hold us up right now. We're adopting a new ordinance. I think we'll work with Scott and his team to make sure that they have capacity to do this, and we are having conversations with the Regional Planning Commission and CADMO about how maybe they can assist with that. But yeah, I would say we'll keep banging on the door of a full-time TDM coordinator so we get it, but let's not hold up. We're making some important improvements.
We were gonna hire, if we were gonna pursue a regional TDM coordinator, which I like the idea of that. Do we need an entity sort of or could we just have an agreement between municipalities, like on cost sharing or something?
Yeah,
How might that work?
I don't know if I've thought too much about the model. I think a few of us have thought that full-time position potentially could be housed within the Regional Planning Commission. I'd have to confirm that with them. Probably not CATMA, but maybe there's a role, and I ultimately think, yeah, some sort of cost sharing to support TDM coordination would probably be part of the strategy here.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Seeing none, next steps are you're going to potentially come back to us in the near future. With some draft ideas, I guess.
The first next step is we've got a meeting set up, some internal folks, CATMA, CCRPC, car share, GMP, just to talk about what a draft amendment should include from their perspective. We've got some really good feedback from Car Share Vermont about challenges that they've experienced regarding car share and TDM. So we're gonna bring those folks to the table and others who are providing programs and services, SSTA, others, talk to them, and then they will inform any draft amendments that we're going to do. Hopefully May. Looking forward, I'm fully expecting, this to be a recurring meeting or two. So might be a TDM Ordinance.
Thank you, Scott. So I'll go ahead and close that. My agenda. Our next item is public forum. So are there members from the public who wish to speak? And do we have a summary sheet? Oh, we have. Excellent. So we'll go to folks in the room, and then if there's folks online, let's say there's at least two. We'll go to them next. So the first item on the list is Judy Barber.
You all answering the questions and concerns I have. One question, probably what's not relevant now, but it could be if this comes up again. I assume UVM has been approached to follow the example of Champlain in the hospital in terms of on-site learning, as opposed to following employees into neighborhoods. Has that been on the table with UVM, and what are their thoughts about that?
Usually public comment, we take comment,
Not a question.
but not questions.
Okay.
But if, I don't know if
You want to talk about
others
it?
want to answer.
It's not important to me. I understand.
Okay.
I would,
Go ahead.
University of Vermont, Champlain College, and the Medical Center are all required to submit an institutional parking management plan. That's part of the parking ordinance. They traditionally have done that jointly. So there's a joint institutional parking management plan that they submit every 5 years, and there's an annual updating process. That update will come to us in a couple months. As part of that, they do on-street parking counts around the institutions. We've been having conversations about, when is the best time to conduct parking counts? What's really the purpose? It's my opinion that the extent of those parking counts really isn't capturing the impact that I think you're identifying here. And we do have an opportunity in the upcoming citywide transportation plan scope permitting to take a broader look at the impact of the institution's parking demand on the city streets, including farther flung streets in the neighborhoods that aren't currently studied in the institutional parking management. So I would say stay tuned, especially to that upcoming transportation plan. And if you're interested, the institutional parking management plan will be coming to the planning commission this year.
Will be coming here, Charles.
Traditionally, it does come to, but I'm happy to provide an update. Update to you, we do get an update to that.
Actually, still written. Yeah, maybe come back to the
We haven't gotten it in the past, but I think that given all the recent conversations in the last 3 years.
Next on our list is Glenn Jarrett.
Thanks. In the interest of time, I'm happy to hold my remarks to whatever future date is appropriate.
You're welcome also. Next we have Catherine, I think it's Carcinaro. Did I get it?
Yes.
Excellent.
Since I may not be here when it is pertinent, I will offer some comments now. I won't ask any questions, but I will offer. I'm here out of concern for the resident parking, which we've been reassured we're not discussing. Is that correct? But when you are discussing, I may not be available to come. So I will offer some comments right now. I'm in Ward 6. I live on one of the narrower streets, Robinson Parkway. It's one of the streets that if resident parking passes are sold to anyone other than residents, our street is going to be the one that's going to be impacted first. We back up to the campus where the chapel is, that side. We also are the closest in proximity for students to buy passes and walk to campus. So we will be the first to be impacted. I believe University Terrace will also be one of the streets impacted very quickly. We now currently have children that walk to and from school. We are not allowed, I have been for over almost 4 decades now, lived there, and my husband and I only have had one vehicle. I walked to UVM to work, I walked home, or he took me if the weather was bad. I've been denied, I have a large family. I've been denied 3 parking passes, even though I only have 1 car. Everyone else on the street that has 2 cars gets 2 passes and 2 cars. So I've been fine with it because we chose to only have 1 car. But before you start selling passes, I think residents should be offered the ability to have passes for large family members. I personally have to work with my neighbors. They park their cars on the street so that my family can park in their driveways when they come to visit. My husband was very ill. He has passed away. In order to have caregivers, family members, when he was in hospice, I again had to work with my neighbors, and we're a very close-knit neighborhood. To be able to have family there without getting tickets. A number of my children paid $65 to come and visit while he was in hospice. We, because we're considered the hill section, pay a huge amount of taxes. And none of us are seeing that we're getting respect from the city for our needs. If you come on our street and there's construction there, a vehicle, and there's one family who have 2 cars, one is in a driveway, one is on the street, where are you gonna, what spaces are available to sell? So I know that was a question, I don't expect an answer. It's a comment of, why is this even being considered on small streets that are very narrow when we can't park enough cars as it is? So I will come back if this comes up, but I might not be here. So those are my comments, and I hope you really take them to heart. I know I got an email back from you, which was very unsatisfying. I was having family and friends for 3-hour lunch, a number of people. The answer was have them carpool. I came down to get passes and I was told I had to buy the passes for elderly people to come to my house for a celebration. I had to buy them, and I was supposed to go online and fill out a form to request to get approval to buy passes for a 3-hour lunch. What is the fairness in that to the people of this city? And the answer was, or work it out with your neighbors, which is what we have been doing all along. I'm very concerned as someone that's lived in this city. I'm a born Vermonter. I've lived in the city for decades. I'm still trying to struggle with where do we fit into people that are not residents, that are not taxpayers. I have a grandson that's a student at UVM, so I have nothing against students, and the students that are around us are incredibly respectful. So I have no problem with students. But I do have a problem with you selling parking spaces to people that are not taxpayers that would easily get on the cat. Do something, but don't compromise our lifestyle and our children's lifestyle and the kids that live on the streets lifestyle, because we want to put money in our coffers by selling parking spaces.
So what we heard tonight is that particular recommendation is off the table right now. With regard to some of your other issues, the residential parking permit plan is gonna be taken up as part of the greater transportation plan. Is that correct? Or,
Well, there's a couple other actions.
and I'm just wondering if some of the other concerns that were voiced would potentially.
Chapin and I will talk about that with our teams.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
heard about the interaction with parking services and happy to talk offline.
Okay.
Okay. Next, we have David Lysico.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Are you leaving? I can't hear very well. I heard about half of what I'd say a quarter of what everybody said. But so the selling of parking, so if I'm talking loud, it's because I can't hear. But anyways, so the selling of parking permits is off the table, right?
To non-residents, yeah.
Okay, so I guess I wanted to ask that gentleman, he left, about car share and about TDMs. I don't know, I ride the bus a lot. I mean, I have a bus because I'm old, so I get half off anyways. So I pay $1. And I $2 maximum. I can ride the bus all day long for $2. Okay, so I have a card right in my pocket right now. You can all take the bus home if you want. I'll pay it. It's $1. But anyways, so this car share thing that he said it like a dozen times. You know, I stuck in my ear, but that's all I heard. But I mean, I looked into car share and it's expensive. It's economically unfeasible for me. I mean, the cost, you pay a monthly fee, then you pay an hourly fee, and it's like, I don't even know who would do that, to tell you the truth. So I think the public, I mean, these plans are really excellent, talking points, but public transportation in the city of Burlington is crap, okay? If I want to take a bus, I can take a bus because I have all the time in the world. I can take my time. But if you're in a hurry, you got a job. I mean, I work with a guy who lives on North Avenue. He has to take a bus from North Avenue down to the middle of the city. Then he jumps on the one bus to go to Williston. That's the bus I take, the one bus. That's a lot of time. I mean, you're asking people to sacrifice, and he's got a little kids at home, the wife and little kids. It's not like me, but that's a lot of time out of his day. Because the thing is, he's making a commitment to ride public transportation, but he pays a penalty for it. People aren't going to do that because there's no advantage to it. What I want is what's his name? Where the self-driving cars, I type in my, I can't type in my phone. I'd have to ask my wife, but she type in her phone, I want a car here at 8 o'clock, boom, the car's there at 8 o'clock, boom, it takes me to work, boom, it brings me back. That's what people want. Anything else is just, I lived in a city, I think we're probably the oldest residents on the street that lived there the most. Like she said, 4 decades. I think I've been there 4 decades, but I've come to dozens of these meetings, and it's like the planning, the talking, the planning, the programs, the TDMs, all the acronyms, blah, blah, blah. Why I lived in Burlington. I went to Christ the King School when I was a kid. Okay, so in my mind, why is it getting worse and not better? All you guys talk and make plans. I mean, my son was on the planning commission way back in '70 when you revamped, when you had to have 2 parking places for each apartment. I don't know if anybody here remembers that, but that used to be an ordinance that they spent thousands and thousands and thousands of hours rezoning, writing and rezoning. And it's all gone to crap. Now you can have 20 guys in your building and they all can have a car and every student's gonna have a car. You see, you're going against a strong headwind. And it's called people. People want what they want, especially nowadays. Back in the day, hey, I'd suffer a little bit, but right now people, they're not gonna do that. They want what they want. And this is not what they want. So this isn't gonna do anything. And I know, everybody's gonna sit here and go, wow, he's a nutcase, but it's the truth. Because I've seen this 40 some odd plus years of going to meetings like this, going to City Hall, having my voice heard, blah, blah, blah. I remember I went to Catmull. I had an argument with Catmull, the guy from Catmull 20 years ago when I had an argument when they were building University Heights. And I was the only one that at the environmental impact meeting, there was 100 people there. They were all lawyers and UVM lawyers and UVM personnel, and I was the only civilian there. But the guy from Catmull said, well, it's not as bad as Boston. I wanted to just slap him, really, because it's like, is that the criteria? Is that the, goalpost that we're aiming for? We're not like Boston, or we're just as much as congested as Boston is. In every college town that you go to, Harvard, Penn, all these guys, they're inner city schools, colleges. They all have parking lots. I went to Harvard and got a ticket because he said 1 hour maximum parking. So I said, oh, this is cool. So I parked my car and I ran back with my son and said, oh, it's been an hour. I got to move my car. They're going to give me a ticket. And then I saw a parking space in front of me. This is how naive I am. I saw a parking space in front of me. I said, well, I spent 1 hour here and I'll spend 1 hour there. That's not how it works. Because they take your license plate number down and they give you a ticket. Every college town is like this. And I don't see why we should pay the penalty or the brunt of UVM. I'm not a big UVM fan, obviously. And so, they build 500 residences and they let in 1,000 students. That's their modus operandi. And every one of those students that move off campus have a car. It's, this is a feel good. This is like, oh, we've done something today. It's not going to amount to nothing. I'm telling you. Things have not gotten better, they've gotten worse.
Thanks for your comments.
Next we have Chair Chan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Jack Tiano. I wanted to make some brief comments about the walk, bike, action, safety plan thing. Is the name of it? The walk, bike update, and also kind of some brief comments about the TDM. I'll start with the safety action plan. So I'm on the Burlington Walk Bike Council. I was to kind of delegate to the PA. There's so many acronyms. The PAC, which again I always forget. Processing advisory. Yes, thank you. For this project, and so kind of I've sat through all the meetings. Most of you in this room are also on the PAC. So, but just to kind of speak to it, there was a couple times throughout the process that I was a little kind of frustrated in the direction that it was going. I finally read through the whole plan that we got yesterday, the day before, like the final deliverable that I think is kind of on the agenda for tonight. And I don't hate it, right? It's I think it has a lot of good components to it. But that being said, what I said at the beginning of this process was that I understand kind of the goal that this is to kind of meet these requirements to kind of hit these types of grants, like specifically the Safe Streets for All grant to position the city to get funding for these types of projects. I didn't make this comment foreseeing where we would be, but I kind of felt like it was maybe not in our best interests to spend so much time on a project that was so narrowly focused on federal funding sources that may or may not be guaranteed, and here we are. And so what I said at the beginning and what I said at the first public meeting, what I'm saying now is that I don't think this is a bad plan. I just don't think that it actually gets us where we need to go, right? It does what it set out to do, and it does it pretty well. There's nothing in this plan that I disagree with that I think will make the streets less safe. But I don't think that it really was utilized to be the opportunity to kind of take a step back and say, we've had 8 years of the walk bike plan on the record, how has it really gone, and are we moving fast enough for this to matter? Even taking another step back, looking at kind of our Great Streets project, which kind of is, it's what, 10 years or so, it's been around for a little while, we've built some streets out to these specs, and it's to kind of take a step back and say, are these doing what we want them to do? I would argue, not that I think the Champlain Parkway is part of that, but a lot of the newer streets, newer road designs in the city, I think if we're talking about like future forward, like, best case examples, I don't think that they get there. And so this is me kind of at the end of that process saying, I don't have a problem with it. But I think that like the work that I was hoping we're gonna do with that has still not happened. There are still some big questions we need to ask about how we rethink our transportation planning process around active transportation. I think part of this will be part of the transportation plan. I would hope, and just kind of the thing that I'm worried about is we don't set out these guidelines for what we hope to get out of that process may also end up looking like this one, where kind of the scope is defined up front in a way where it's like, well, no, like that's not really what we're talking about here. And so just kind of as we're running out of room to kind of have the big conversation of like, has this first iteration of Burlington's like future forward transportation planning process worked? What hasn't worked? What do you do about it? How do we make sure we're going fast enough to meet these deadlines, to meet the climate commitments that we made as a city, the active transportation goals we made as a city? Anyway, so that's kind of me saying that. And so I guess on the TDM, I like Becca asked. I was kind of under the impression that like we were, and this seems to be where we're at, where like we kind of put this first TDM thing in place, and there was kind of a controversy, not controversy, but we talk about, well, we've got this big plan coming out. Do we do something in the meantime, or do we just wait for that? And we kind of did this first draft, and now we're hearing how it's going. I think it was good that we got something out there, and we're getting data collected, and we're seeing how it went. We have this like much more comprehensive study. So I read through that whole thing, and I think there was a lot of really great pieces to that. And I guess now I kind of thought that this meeting was gonna be more about that, but it seems like that's kind of teeing up for having that conversation about what our ordinance update looks like and how all of those recommendations play in, and which parts we're not gonna touch on, like we spoke to not to tonight, but which parts we are gonna take up that are really valuable. And the thing I guess that I would just say, without diving into the weeds, because I don't think it's necessary right now, but looking at kind of excuse me, an updated TDM plan, especially with a lot of public education being a core part of it, which I think is really important. And also looking at like a new transportation plan that the city is considering or is working towards. I've said this to city council, I've said this to everybody. I think that we kind of have a blind spot on transportation, not in terms of like that we're not doing anything about it, but there's like not a lot, it's not sexy work. I don't see really deep engagement or interest from the city council or from the mayor's office or from a lot of these different parts of the city as a whole, just because there's so many big juicy problems that we're trying to deal with as a city. Transportation and housing are like kind of the backbone of a functioning city. And I think a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve, we don't really take transportation seriously and how it interfaces with housing. We're kind of setting ourselves up to fail in the medium to long term. So my hope for you as the TEUC is to kind of, and for DPW, the planning department, is hoping that this can be like this moment of like a coordinated effort to kind of reframe how we think about transportation in the city and like really take it seriously as like as a fundamental, like a backbone set of policy, and how an updated TDM policy ties into the transportation plan, ties into future Great Streets projects, and ties into our housing and our corridor zoning. And there's a lot of these things that are overlapped, and it's hard to get them all in the same thing, because we were talking about parking earlier and saying that it was going to planning commission, but then there's also like, it would make sense that it would come to the transportation committee, and then also that like, it should go probably to the public works commission as well, because I feel like maybe, so there's so many different places that this should be going to. Ordinance committee, so it's like, they're all overlapping, and I'm kind of frustrated sometimes about how the importance of where all those things overlap or not, how they together. That's the end of my confusing stream of consciousness conversation about.
Thanks, Jack. Now we're going to turn to our online participants. I see.
Sorry, I came in late. Yeah, do you want me to sign? I can
Well, I
sign.
just need to know your name for the
Oh,
record.
Nolan Rogers. Okay, Ward 3. Yeah, I have, maybe unsurprisingly, very similar thoughts to Jack. I guess I wrote them down, so hopefully I won't ramble too much. So the main thing I want to talk about, the walk bike, action plan deal, and my thoughts on that, generally speaking, are, you know, we haven't done much. I think that's kind of the big idea of the analysis of the walk bike action plan. Like Jack said, I don't disagree with anything. I think we did all of the things in the walk bike action plan, that would be great. Obviously, the problem is that we are not doing those things. And kind of from a structural standpoint, my opinion is that the way we approach mainly bicycle infrastructure, but to a certain extent pedestrian infrastructure, which is really just people-oriented infrastructure, generally is not good. Because we try to get kind of these table scraps off of federal and state grants. And we almost do nothing dedicated specifically to walking and biking besides sidewalks. And so like I kind of ask myself, why do people come to Burlington, right? Besides UVM, which is like a huge chunk of parents coming to see their kids. People come to Burlington because Church Street is by and large great. And the waterfront and the bike path are amazing from April through October. So that's why people come to Burlington, at least in my view. It has a lot of other great things too, but those are huge for tourism, and we love tourism. I guess that's the big moneymaker for our city besides property taxes. So if I think about those two things, they are directly people-oriented infrastructure, right? With Church Street, we have built a true street, which is a place for people to gather and spend their time and spend their money ultimately as well, which is great. But it's just a nice place to be, right? And so that's why people like to come here. Also, from a property tax standpoint, the city makes probably the most of its money per square foot on Church Street through property taxes. It is lucrative to have things like that for the city. You get back more than you put in terms of money. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer to try to do more things like that. And I don't think anybody would really be opposed to making more nice places that people like to be. So the question, I guess, is, you know, what do we do instead? What's the other? Because in my mind, this kind of always going for federal and state transportation money through grants and spending so much time on that doesn't really work for the active transportation. We don't get places like Church Street and like the waterfront bike path built by doing that. And so we need to figure out a different way of doing that. And perhaps that's directly through taxpayer dollars. I know South Burlington, I just learned recently, has their penny for paths type thing. So I would say, you know, when's the last time that you can remember that Burlington Department of Public Works or the city in general said, we are going to build a dedicated, we're going to spend this chunk of money that's not attached to anything else on, you know, a walking or a biking thing. We have sidewalks, which is huge, and that does take up a lot of time. So I want to acknowledge that we do that, and it's, you know, for having a fairly not that dense city, we do spend a lot of time and money on that, and that is, I think that's good. But you know, we don't think of all of the time and money we spend on making car things in Burlington, which is a city, which is not, you know, supposed to be a highway. It doesn't really benefit people if we make the city highway, like a place where people can get from place to place quickly. Burlington is the place that you want to get to. So can we put in an east to west connection? I think that's the #1 priority in Burlington that is separated from cars for people biking and walking. It could be a church street, it shouldn't really be a church street because it would be more of a connection between South Burlington and the University of Burlington, but we need something dedicated because we have a bike lane on Pearl Street, which is really just a shoulder with a little bit of paint and a lot of sand and glass in it that, you know, gets washed out all the time. And we have the wiggle / bike path up Loomis Street, which is not really, it's just like we did the quick build, which is good, we should do more of that stuff, but it's not much. And so we don't have a good connection between South Burlington and Burlington. So we gotta do that, we're gonna work on that. Okay, anyway, that's too much rambling. I wanna say also, you know, pay people more, hire people more for recycling. I know we're trying to do that, but we should keep it in Burlington. And for TDM, you know, if parking is an issue, which it always is, but only at certain times, then we do need to price that parking if it is available to people from outside of the city, which we do, and I'm very much in favor of. I won't touch on the other things that people already talked about, it's off the table. If we need to get people from the surrounding communities in and out of Burlington in a transportation demand management manner, that basically just means adding buses and funding busing and funding active transportation. That's like, those are the options. So if we have this problem, which I'm not sure that we always do, of parking, then we need to figure out a frequent and reliable bus transportation system and fund that. Because the parking thing, like, first of all, not everybody has a car to begin with, but if the goal is to reduce car trips, then we shouldn't be trying to do it with cars, you know? So anyway, do the TDM, emphasize doing that when at the times that it is an issue, and fund that through busing and creating the opportunity for extra transportation. The hospital does that a lot on their own with their buses. So I don't know if we need to tell them to do that more or not, or tell UVM to do that more, but that's kind of the option. So those are my thoughts. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Nolan. And I want to thank Sharon and Barbara for waiting patiently online. Sharon, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, this is interesting. You always get educated by what you hear, either by the presentation, the committee, or the public. And so, yes, this was informative for me. My name is Sharon Busher, and I'm going to speak hopefully briefly on 2 topics. The first is the TDM proposed ordinance that Charles is going to work on and then bring back a draft to you. I wanted to first off, I understand residential parking is not on the table, so I'm not going to speak to that. But I am going to speak to the neighborhood TDM, which I understood from the information in the packet that as that moves forward, there will be more public engagement. And I think that's key because the neighborhood that was studied was right around the community health center, and access to maybe groceries or shops is closer for that group than other areas in the city. And so I think each area of the city has different constraints and availability of services. And so the neighborhood TDM approaches need to be geared towards what the needs are and how you successfully move people around in that area to the services and the destinations they need to go. So I was very happy to see that. So that's a plus. Thank you for whoever put that in, that there'll be more community engagement. Number two is that in the TDM plan, Charles showed the proposed ordinance, existing ordinance, and he had some charts of large, medium, and small projects. And in one of those charts, there was a reference about ADA spaces. And if the on-site parking, if there's on-site parking provided by the developer, then an ADA space needs to be accommodated. However, if no on-site parking is accommodated, is planned, then if you have a disability, you're out of luck. You're on your own. And I'm very surprised that if indeed these plans get run by AARP and our Accessibility Council, that no one has actually brought this up, that this is a barrier for people with disabilities. Gene Bergman knows this, but I have a voice message from Bill Ward and Kim Sturdivant from 2023, where I raised this issue. And Kim had worked through a proposal saying that when you build housing, you have to accommodate, if so many units, you have to have an ADA accessible unit. Okay, but you don't, if you don't have parking required for that project, there's no requirement for a parking space to go with that unit. And so Kim proposed that there really needed to be some kind of ratio, not a space for every ADA unit, but there needed to be some accommodation for parking for people who have disabilities who need to park in close proximity to where they live. And I think we've fallen short in our rush to develop. I think all of our proposals don't really meet the needs of the people with disabilities. And I'm asking the TEUC, and because you're members of the City Council and the DPW staff, to really consider this and figure a way, and I'll be more than happy to facilitate the message that I got from Kim and Bill Ward on how to potentially bring us forward so that we don't leave populations of people behind. So with TDM, I really think accessibility needs to be a factor in that project. So thank you for that. The second thing that I wanted to speak to, because I am going to actually leave this meeting and go to another meeting, was a topic regarding recycling tonight for you to consider. And I want to be really clear that I love recycling, and I understand that the city is not going to abandon recycling, but they are looking for changes in the recycling program. Those changes I'm not a fan of, because I don't really feel as a resident I have the information I need. I learned from going to the DPW Commission that they talked about, Lee talked about, and Chapin talked about the number of people that actually do the work Monday through Friday. And I didn't get this in writing, but I believe they said there are 4 dedicated staff. There might be more to provide services Monday through Friday. My question is that enough, or does that require augmentation or pulling from other areas like the street department, not when there's a vacancy or a sickness, but just to get the job done? How many people do you really need to staff a program like that? And I don't know the answer to that. That's number one. Number two is that, we heard, you heard, and I listened to employees come before the city council who are street maintenance workers who were exhausted from having to do double shifts, triple shifts, when they had to plow and when they then had to fill in for recycling. That is problematic. I don't know how many, in our warming environment, I don't know how many times that happens. And I'm not trying to be hardcore or insensitive to when it does happen, but I needed to know how frequently does that happen? And I understand if I'm an employee who was hired to be a street maintenance worker, I am not going to be happy if I have to go and do a job that I wasn't hired to do. So I don't know whether we need to have jobs that are you're hired into a job that does both recycling and street maintenance. Maybe you already have those joint positions. I don't know. But I think we need to think about that. The other thing that I learned that I'm sharing with the committee is that there's a lot of repair going on with the recycling trucks. And actually, I wrote this down, and I'm not perfect, so you can verify the information with Chapin and Lee, but they talked about like 1,200 hours of people with wrenches working on equipment, but 2/3 of those hours, around 800 of those hours, were dedicated to the recycling vehicles. So my thought is, well, when you have that amount of time dedicated to one or two vehicles, when does that trigger us saying, wait a minute, we need to potentially make a capital investment in capital equipment and purchase a new truck so that we're not spending all of our hours fixing just these vehicles? And so I didn't get an answer to that, but I think that my point is, I think that the committee and the department and the city really needs to look at all of these details and figure out what is currently there, what haven't we been doing as well as we could, what could we do better before you contract this out. I'm asking for the details. I'm very detailed oriented, as many of you know, but I think it serves us well when you have things to look at and build your solution on those details. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and I wish I could hear your conversation, but I won't be able to. And I hope that the city, DPW, and the committee take their time in deciding what to do with recycling. The last thing is, and I'm sorry, forgive me, but in the overall process, there was a discussion about if we consolidated everything, now this is in the future, for recycling, trash, and compost, that we would utilize the solid waste generation tax. And I'm sorry, but for me, every time I hear another tax being increased, I get concerned. I'm sorry, I'm a broken record, but affordability is real and it is a factor. And I want to be able to live here, and I want other people to be able to live here too. So thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And you can hear the rest of our meeting. It's being recorded. If you're so inclined later on or another time. And lastly, we have Barbara. I think it's probably Barbara Hedrick.
And I'm responding to Sharon's comments right now. You'll have info in your inbox in 5 minutes, Sharon.
Okay. Go ahead, Barbara.
Okay, so first I want to talk about the TDM report overall, and then I want to focus on something that you've taken off the table, but you haven't eliminated from the report. So regarding the report overall, I'm really frustrated with it because everything that Charles is suggesting as a recommendation is what UVM has been doing for 20 years. And for 20 years, UVM has not reduced its SOV commuter rates. So all these transportation options look good, they sound good, but they do not drive down SOV rates. And when SOV rates are high, there's high pollution, there's high parking demand, there's lots of traffic, and it compromises street safety. So I think the problem is that transportation option strategy is one of many strategies that needs to be considered to actually create a TDM plan. We need strategies on how to get commuters to use buses from their surrounding town park and ride lots. We need strategies about how we can change our ordinances to discourage on-campus students from bringing their cars to campus. We need strategies about how to earn revenues, but also decrease the number of commuters parking on streets. We need much more than just transportation options to have an effective TDM plan. And I really encourage the folks in this meeting and Charles to go online and to look at fundamental classic plan development models. You have a plan, you outline your objectives. For TDM, it's reducing SOV rates, reducing pollution, reducing parking demand, reducing traffic volume, underlying volume, as well as congestion. And all those objectives then guide the strategies, because you then compare your strategies against the objectives and you say, is it going to accomplish these objectives? The mistake made here is transportation options has become the objective, and that's not the objective. The objectives are those things I just listed. You know, I listened to Charles very carefully because I heard this before, but I wanted to make sure I heard him right. Is he said, TDM is all the things that makes it easier to move around. Wrong. That's not TDM. TDM is reducing pollution, reducing SOV rates. Transportation options is a strategy, one strategy of many strategies to have effective TDM. So I really encourage you to keep the report, but have Charles do more work, so that we don't just follow in UVM's footsteps where we do exactly what UVM's doing and we end up with no reduction in SOV rates. And I wrote Charles an email. I'm more than happy to provide help. I've developed strategies and plans throughout my 30-year business career. I'm more than happy to help for free. Give him my ideas. We can make this good. TDM is something, and reducing pollution and reducing SOV rates means a lot to me. And I feel like this is something that's really important for the city. So I want it to be effective. And if we just do what UVM's doing, UVM's going to earn all these points that Charles has outlined, that, people who comply, they're going to get all these points, but we aren't going to get UVM to be any more effective than they are today. And we really want to have a plan that gives them incentive to actually reduce SOV rates. All right, moving on. I was disappointed that I heard you say there's no plan at this time, quote unquote, to implement the idea of selling parking permits to commuters. I wish the words I heard were, we're removing this idea from the report. There's a big difference between what I heard and what I wish you said. And there's two good reasons to remove the idea from the report. The idea of selling permits to commuters is completely opposite of good TDM. When you sell permits to commuters, you're increasing SOV rates, you're increasing traffic, you're increasing transportation pollution. It is the complete opposite of TDM and should not be in a TDM report. And the idea is so, to quote Jean, stupid, it needs to be taken out of the report. And it should not be resurrected in the future. It's got to be nixed, buried, done history, okay? We're moving forward. We're going to be smarter than we are in the past. We're going to be smarter than other cities. We're going to reduce the number of commuters parking on our streets, because that will result in good, effective TDM. And my last point is, it would be really unfortunate for the teams of lawyers who work for oil companies and all the tools and resources they have to find and they will find it, trust me, I know them, they will find this policy idea of selling permits to commuters, and they will quickly recognize the pollution ramifications from that, and it will potentially undermine the state's lawsuit against the oil companies. So you're risking a really important lawsuit for the state by having this policy remain in the report. And you'll say, oh, how would the oil companies ever find it? They have these AI search tools and they will find it, okay? And they will use this as one data point and they'll collect lots of other data points to show we knew it would increase pollution and we made this policy choice or we're considering it. And they'll say, okay, state, even if you knew 30 years ago that fossil fuels created pollution, we're still seeing evidence today that people are choosing other things despite the fact that it'll increase pollution. So we need to be smarter. We don't want to increase pollution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. And that concludes, I believe, public forum. So we will move on to our deliberative agenda, and the first item is a draft of the recommendations for the walk bike action plan.
Thank you. Let me be here, Philip Peterson, Senior Transportation Planner with Public Works, with Jacob and for Laura. And happy to give a briefing and have a discussion. So this is an opportunity to give the walk bike action plan some public air. Councilor has an opportunity to take a look at the draft and actually print it. So take notes as you go through it and have questions.
And I ask a question, I'm having computer issues, could it be posted when the document on the share screen?
Sure.
Thank you.
So to go to a couple of the points that you made about why we're doing this. It's true, the federal government, certain elements, FHWA does require an update to your walking, biking and rolling plan, your active transportation plan every few years. But it's a good thing. I mean, ultimately, technology's changed, data is updated, things have been implemented. We need to show the federal government that as a community, we're still committed to this plan. And then, yeah, we have some priorities change. And so ultimately, it's a good thing. So what are some key highlights? There's some arterial corridor reconfigurations discussed, namely sheltering streets, reducing lane widths and vehicle speeds, introducing curb extensions, adding buffered bike lanes, intersection improvements, data-driven strategy, making sure that we're using data to drive a lot of these strategies, and also funding opportunities, positioning Burlington to leverage grant programs like Safe Streets for All. But there are other financial avenues for plan implementation, so I kind of talk about that in my memo. One thing that this plan is not a transit plan, and so we kind of got tripwired a few times during public meetings where folks really want to zero in on discussing transit and busing. This is a walking, biking, and rolling plan. Plan VTB Walk Bike is all about active transportation. This is not a transit plan. We do talk about it peripherally. The original plan from 2017 talks about transit peripherally, but it's not a focus, and it certainly isn't part of that. We are going to do an update to the citywide transportation plan this year, and I'm sure that we'll talk about transit in that discussion, with an understanding that our transit partners currently are external partners, GMT, and we know that they have some challenges, but we're not going to get into all that if you want to. So kind of the briefing and the memo that I have underscores our commitment to proactively address roadway safety through collaborative, data-driven initiatives. Continued support of the TEUC will be instrumental in advancing the plan and securing the resources needed to make meaningful improvements citywide for walking, biking, and rolling in the city. And our intention is to, like I said, give this a little bit of air tonight, have a discussion around the draft plan, and take your comments and come back in a month after we've had an opportunity to give it some air. Let other external partners take a look at it, send it on to folks in the city, other people that are interested in the plan. Burlington Walk Bike Council will have an opportunity to take a look at it. We'll be discussing that at our next meeting, which is in a week and a half. Happy to take questions. Discuss the details. You've had a chance to look at it. Questions from the committee? Ready to take notes, like a pen.
Sure. Thank you. I haven't been able to fully read it, but I read the specific recommendations, and as members of the public have said, I think they're all great. I think as with the original plan, I think these are things that we should be doing as a city and that we should be prioritizing as we begin doing more and more new road related projects. I guess my concern, which has been shared by the public, is about implementation, and we're taking this more narrow lens in hopes of acquiring this money. But as we saw with Bank of Cherry and with the Champlain Parkway, that, and with the bridge even, that restricts us from being able to fully fulfill our goals as a city to create more people-oriented and active transit-oriented infrastructure. We're often constrained by our grants and by our monies. So in thinking about implementation, I guess, is that looking into the future, those are some concerns that I share with the public. And also in general, with the speed of implementation, I'm wondering what we can, if anything, can we do better to in terms of the speed of implementation, I guess.
It all takes money. Yeah. So it comes down to projects. Once you get into Battery Street, great example for a project that came last month once the city council was approved. That's a big ticket project. We're talking about moving curb, and we're happy to proceed. The city council wants us to move forward and identify funds that are on federal funds that are not funds that are external partners. Then we'll proceed. It takes money. We have to pay for these things. Nobody wants to do this more than me. For sure. And my team, Chief and Spencer, super motivated with the folks. We do want to make these things happen, but it does get expensive.
Maybe one of the future pieces following up to that is having the committee and staff work through, what funding is available, where to prioritize that funding. I know that the city overall got the $20 million obligation bond. Part of that's for buildings, part of that's for vehicles, to plow streets. Part of that is for transportation safety. The council can weigh in on where the priorities are, and we can talk about what, is most urgent. So happy to have that conversation. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I agree a lot with what Councilor Broderick said, and I think as a next step coming out of this, it would be great to sort of get some numbers attached. Like, there's a lot on this list. Maybe you all and your teams have, the top 5 things that you'd like to pursue. Maybe we could just get a ballpark number for.
I would love to apply for a Safe Streets for All grant and do Shelburne Street as a project identified. It's a top priority project. It seems like a way to go. We have other projects that we're applying for technical assistance for kind of the interim project on Battery Streets. So that one's not necessarily ready for bigger dollars. Other projects, sometimes we try and find smart ways to spend our money. So what I mean by that is when a bigger project like paving project, and we know the streets that they're going to be working on, we we got this list, we have these priorities, but if they're doing a project on, say, Archibald Street, let's take advantage of that.
Right.
We already have a contractor that's going to be out there. Let's initiate a project there, which we're doing, right?
So hold on one sec, because I think Becca was still talking about priorities and
Yes.
funding. So why don't you finish your thought?
And that's great to hear that you
Yeah.
I'm glad there's excitement for Shelburne Road. I think that is a top priority for myself as well. So to a couple of other things. Obviously, this whole project is tied to grant money, so I'm curious to hear about, how that's going and when it's gonna get here. And then the last thing that I didn't see in here, that came up in the pack was the idea of like a goal date. There's some controversy around that. And I think it was 2040 was what we had been discussing, and I just, I'm curious why there's no date in here, and I'm hoping that it's before 2040, because that really, we need to move faster. So curious about just that process, because it came up in the beginning and then it didn't come back up, and
It's tricky, right? I mean, these dates, I mean, we set these dates and we wanna hit these dates. Sure, I guess I would say, when do you think that we should have this goal date?
was there another discussion about that in the pack? Cause I think I missed one meeting, but I
I think we discussed it, but certainly wasn't the focus of that next meeting, that next conversation.
Yeah.
I think we wanted to get zeroed in on the plan itself and the actual work behind it.
I mean, I guess if you want a date, I would love to know what we can get done by 2030. You know, of all this, a 5-year timeline for some real implementation. You know, and then, of course, we're gonna need to break that down year by year.
Right.
And so, you know, I would love to come out of this with some knowledge of what we're gonna do, you know, on that horizon and how much it's gonna cost. Because I think any longer than that is too long, and it's also, you know, 5 years is a manageable time period, I think.
I would second that. I would at least want to see, if we are thinking aggressively but realistically, I would also want to see, what, like what I was talking about, like, comparing like what the speed is going at now. If we were thinking aggressively but realistically, how much faster can we go on each of these items, how much it's going to cost. And if we extrapolate that out to this entire plan, I would want to know how long realistically that would take in terms, so that we can properly do goal setting, and that we can actually hold ourselves, the city, accountable to the goals that we set. And if decisions are made in the future that might stymie that, we can look back to these things and say, we decided that this is the way we want to move as a city. And you gotta give us a damn good reason why we want to slow that timeline down.
And if it's agreeable to the director, we can reprioritize staff time and sit down and definitely come up with some numbers. Some approximate numbers on how much projects would cost individually.
I think what I'm hearing from the council is great, that you're really interested in, like, the listing of the projects are good. That seems exciting, and that there's general alignment here. There's interest in expediting the development. And that's probably worthy of a good meeting to talk through about, okay, if it's federally funded, we're 4 years from date of award to getting a shovel in the ground. So how much we can achieve in 5 years if we're chasing federal money is very little. If we have a source of local dollars and we're ready to commit those, staff can work much faster. And so how we pursue those local dollars and what the sources are, I am happy to sit down and have a work session with the TEUC and try to figure that out.
So just to clarify, on that bullet, the grant money that's tied to this project update, that's 4 years out from us getting it, is that correct? 'Cause it kind of seemed like it was sooner than that when we were talking about it.
So I think what's in the memo that Philip described is this upcoming grant round for Safe Streets for All.
Right.
If we apply in June and are notified for award late in 2025, it is likely that the first installation would be 2028, 2029. When we installed the 5 mid-block RRFBs up on North Avenue, that grant took 4 years. The New North End was frustrated, and there was a fatality at one of the locations before we got through the federal permitting process. And that something that, you know, was hard on all of us. But if we take federal dollars, we have to comply with their process.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's an area where I'm excited that our policy body wants us to do what the plan says. The question is, how do we expedite that work? And absent of additional local money, we are forced into a process at the federal level that slows the work down. Gives us more resource, but requires more work.
I need to step back, and I'm really conscious of what Jack said in terms of the dissonance between these great individual plans. He had said he had no problem with the particulars, but how it fits in with big planning and these other processes, and the way that we do that is an issue, and I agree with them. So it's the idea that we're going to be trying to make this actionable in a lot of ways is like us chasing our tail. It doesn't have to be like that, but it's important for us to put this into context. So my understanding from the very quick thing that you said, Philip, right at the very beginning was this was actually required for being part of the Safe Streets for All program, regardless of any grants that are out there. We had to do this. Am I right? Did I hear that?
You have to update the plan, not just for federal highway, but for other.
So there could be no grants out there, but we had to update the plan anyway, and that's what we've done. And there are these grants that are out there, and this is an opportunity. So the timing sort of is I don't know, there's synchronicity there. Synchronous. How's that for making it work? So okay. I think that's a very important point, because while you're talking about these grants, this isn't tied to a grant. You didn't create this to do that. You like just did this because this is our big plan. We got that.
And not just us, but our regional partners.
So you're working in collaboration with all these folks who care about transportation.
You got it.
Okay, and we come up with this. So I do think that part of the necessary next step requires us to go, okay, how does the walk bike updated plan fit into all of this? It's not part of this, it's not a transit plan, you said that, so therefore, so I think that again, so that we're not just chasing the grants, and that's just sort of the treadmill that we're on, and I understand, let me say, I say that in a denigrating fashion, but you don't get any money, you don't get any projects, so I got that, okay. But the planning is important, so we've got an overarching transportation plan, so there is a need to integrate these things together and to not silo them apart, and for us to be really clear about the linkages and the things. I got that all freaking day.
That's what I've been getting.
I get that all day. There's something going on and we don't know what it is, do we, Mr. Jones? Okay. That's a little Bob Dylan quote. Okay, so there is that. There's a lot of information in the plan. Actually, my computer hasn't crashed yet. I was able to sort of go down, and you've got a priority matrix, which I think would be particularly helpful for there to be sort of a work session on to explain how it is that you know, what is behind all these numbers. I see numbers, I say this because I remember having a conversation, I don't know, Rob, if you were in the room with Maddie and me, and maybe even Laura, around the matrix for deciding what sidewalks should have been, or maybe even Philip, what, you know, what the priority for sidewalk repair. And when I looked at the matrix and I looked at all the criteria, I went, the Old North End is getting cheated. And we're getting cheated because the way that you look at all these integrated services that we've got and the connectivity of things, we're just not, it's not being validated in the plan. Okay, we'll start to work on that, chief, okay. That was like 3 years ago, and I say that as a point of example for why it is very important for us to understand the priority actions and matrix, and you've got proven countermeasures, and you've got crash modification factor, and like those aren't detailed necessarily here. I don't know that, with all these become subjects to contention if we don't spend the time to do that. We have fought with this around Rose Street. That's an example of that, right? So we, there's the traffic coming, there crashes, the neighborhood is Rose Street, up in arms around data and around data collection. I don't want to go through that here. I want to do it once and done, so to speak, and not have to, to recreate that. So I think that we need to sort of like verify, have the explanation that helps us go through it. And this is great.
A high level, like.
I don't need it now, because I think that actually what you need, that if you're asking us to adopt a plan or to endorse a plan, then we gotta understand it. And that means sort of like working through it. And the same way that we're trying to do this with recycling, right? We're getting into the nitty gritty, we're getting our hands dirty in it, and that's what we need to do. And then a similar sort of conversation about what I think is the conversation about the focal corridors. And again, that's where it relates to what these other plans, how do they relate to the plans? How do they relate to what we do in a walk bike plan? And the new information is coming in. So I would love to move fast. You all know that I'm pretty much impatient, but I want this to be done in a fashion that's consistent with what I think I hear a large number of people, or at least a significant number of people calling for, which is a planning process that is really looking at the big picture. And I hope that you put them both together, and this is there, this is part of that process. I don't know why it wouldn't be, but that's where I think we've got to go. So I hate when I say this, when other people say this, with all due respect to my fellow councilors and their desire to be pushing to accelerate this. I want to have the conversation in an accelerated way, but I want to have it done in a way that then will allow us to make sure that it's integrated with that with the planning process, that it's integrated with those folks, that we know exactly what this all means, that we feel confident, demographic context. I mean, all the you can start to community.
It's a rewording of things like equity.
Yeah. Well, we have no equity in this country. You don't have to worry about that. There's no diversity and no equity and no inclusion, but there is community identified. That's fine. I don't care. We just, but what goes into that? You've got numbers on here, and I don't want.
You don't want to know?
I don't want to know right here because there's just too much stuff, and people are mad enough at me for like dragging these frickin' meetings for a couple of centuries, like I always do. But we need to do that. We need to have this focus here so that we are working in the comprehensive way that we need to. So okay, I haven't repeated myself. I'll stop. I think that's okay.
So I 100% agree with what Councilor Berkman just said. It was actually the first thing that I wrote down when you were presenting
really well.
was that how does this fit in with the other plans? Whether it's the larger transportation plans, but also just our annual, maintenance plans, like we're doing, so Hungerford Terrace are we doing right now? And like, we're doing sidewalks and things there, but we're also doing, the chicaned bike lanes, but it's all connected into, the greater plan. So I think we do need to have that context. So I agree, we need to understand how these things interconnect. The next thing though is, around paying for all these things, if we can piggyback some of these things onto federal monies, it's like the biggest leverage we have. We're doing Winooski Bridge was mentioned earlier. It's a $70 to $80 million project, and we gotta pay like $3.5 million. We should do those all day long. And if it comes with some constraints that don't fit perfectly into what we would like to have in an ideal situation, I say the pragmatist in me says we live with that and we do the best, we get as much as we can, but we take the $70 to $80 million. And so I think we just have to be cognizant of that and not let, the perfect be the enemy of the good, to be an old adage. And the last thing I'll say is, I don't know that I am supportive of putting general obligation debt toward this sort of thing. This should come from specific that have restricted funding for this kind of work, because we have miles of sidewalks, not just in the old North End, which is getting short shrifted, I heard, but in the new North End, I have sidewalk blocks that I've been tracking since I've been on the TEUC, and I take pictures every year. There's actually grass growing where there used to be concrete in one of them. It's absolutely, I would put it on a list of the worst small piece of sidewalk in the entire city. And put it enter it into that competition, but it's not going to get done anytime soon. It's not part of DPW's plan. So our general obligation bonding that we do we have to think about the stuff we already have and figure out a way to maintain and fix it before we build more stuff in some cases. I mean, I know that there's a tension there between, is there an urgent need to implement measures to safety? And so I understand those tensions will exist, but I think we always have to start with, we got all this stuff we've already built. How do we maintain it with the general obligation funding that we can put forward?
Yep.
So that's just my sort of general philosophy on that. And that's all I have to say. So my feedback, I guess, is similar in terms of like what to do next, is to try to figure out how this intersects with some of the other, with the other plans that we have we've been talking about. So that we are sort of trying to do things in a cohesive way, I guess.
Circle back on one thing.
Yeah.
I hate it, sorry, circle back. I don't like that phrase. I am a consultant.
We understand what you mean. Keep going.
Dean, when you were talking, it seemed like you thought you were disagreeing with myself and Merrick, and I'll say, at least for me, I totally agree with you too. I think we do need to zoom out. And kind of what I'm picturing is maybe we need to zoom out, but at the same time, we can't, just kind of rubber stamp this report without putting any more specifics behind it and just say, oh, we had to submit that, because a lot of work went into this, and I think there's some important stuff on here. But I think where I would like to see us go is sort of almost like a Venn diagram of, okay, here's all these transportation plans we have going on, and maybe these are the projects that are bubbling up to the top in all of them. And so let's start with those lists, and kind of almost at the same time create a more integrated and robust planning process, because we need that. And then the other piece I wanted to say that I can't remember what you said, Jean, that reminded me of this, but when we started out the action plan update in the pack, we looked at our mode shift data as one of the first things we did here in that process. And I didn't see that in this piece, but I think it's a really Mode shift meaning modes of transportation. So we have some goals in Burlington of where, if it's a pie chart of cars rolling, biking, walking, taking the bus, taking the train, whatever it is. We have, percentages of trips that are in each of those categories. We have some goals primarily around reducing single occupancy trips and increasing bike and ped. And we are not, those were established, like 5 or 7 years ago. We haven't made the progress that we wanted to make. And so I think that's just another piece of important context of how we measure what we're trying to do here as we integrate these plans. And we have some great goals on, so let's see, we know we aren't reaching them. And the decision-making process maybe needs to include, is this project, like say Shelburne Road, will that do anything for mode shift? And at least let's talk about it when we're making these decisions. So I just wanted to mention that.
I think in my mind, maybe I'm naive here, but I see an integration here. What staff is interested in is getting this plan at least accepted to be able to chase money. That doesn't mean or preclude the questions I'm hearing about prioritization and strategy. We have a citywide transportation plan that we want to undertake. In my mind, that is the perfect forum in which to discuss what are our mode shift goals for all modes, not just even bike ped, but how are we planning the city? What are our major corridors looking like? And how do we prioritize our capital projects moving forward, looking at filters of safety, mode shift, or whatever the priorities of the council are? My fear is that if we don't get this approval, we can't apply for this sizable grant to do at least some of the projects in the short term. We can, and that's fine if ultimately people want to take more time, we can put a pause on applying this round and hope that there's future grant funding. This is a program that is funded through the infrastructure bill, and there's only 2 years of funding left, so.
This year and next year, FHWA staff have made it clear that the horizon on that is kind of, so we have this year and next year.
I'm being the pragmatist of, can we do yes and of, maybe we do a work session before next meeting to give a chance to really get into some of the weeds where we could then approve it next session and then have the motion as part of the approval, acknowledge all the future work that we collectively want to do together.
Just to clarify from my own thoughts here, it sounds like what Jake is saying is this is the beginning of a conversation. We're going to get into the transportation plan and that work very soon. We weren't quite ready for an update for that this month. Next month. We've had discussions with the CCRPC, our partners, that will be working with us. So I think continuing this conversation while understanding that you do, if we want to meet certain deadlines by next month, do want to make sure that this plan is approved and ready for city council. So we can capitalize on those dollars.
So the question I got, and I'm really skimming through this really quickly, is what's the grant that you're asking for, since it is not. Yeah, I know, but I mean, you've got all these projects, and these projects are, they're really expensive. You don't have dollar sign, you don't have the dollar cost on it. So are you going to be asking for particular projects?
I
So I guess that, I'm okay with a yes and as long as we're all clear about what the yes is for.
Right.
And so the yes is not necessarily for, okay, based on this plan.
Yeah.
Go get a grant, but I don't have any idea what you're gonna be asking it for, and I don't know which one of these projects is gonna be, and I don't know how it's gonna fit into those programs.
Yeah.
So, sure, you ought to come back in May with a proposal that everybody can see and we can get the people. Jack has been on these planning commissions, they're, planning groups, whatever. you know, they can get it in enough time so that they go, hey, yeah, you know, that makes sense. And if there are things that can be adjusted within the grant application, you know, and maybe there's a different project that people think is, I mean, the more conversation, the slower the process is. I get that, right? And I'm not a fan of that, right? But I think that's where to get to yes, and for it to be a meaningful process, for it not to be a rubber stamp without, you know, and a blank check, literally, because we don't know what you're doing, then I think it will be, that's what we will need to have, and I'm open personally to doing that in that way, and if there's enough time beforehand for us to be able to get that information so that it's not at the end of the, you know, it's a long meeting, then that would be great.
Great.
We can have that answer.
Yeah,
for sure.
We can try to get that grant proposal to you in advance so that you have a chance to give us some initial feedback. So that you're coming to the meeting feeling like you're prepared to act.
You can like also in some sort of memo in a simple way be able to say this is how it fits with all these other plans.
Yeah, right.
And you let the folks who have been involved in those planning processes and are interested in those planning processes know also, so that they're not like, why the hell am I just finding out about this, you know, like a few days before the meeting happens, all that little stuff. If we can do that, that'd be totally cool. Big stuff. Big stuff. It is. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Anything more? You have anything from us? Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing from you is that we need to bring back a grant proposal. There was some follow-up interest around prioritization. My hope is that if we generally agree with the projects in here, then we can kind of accept that this plan is complete and then have a conversation around how we prioritize what we do and how we do it based on, you know, what we agree on there's funding to do and what money we want to chase or what money we want to cultivate locally. But that's ultimately got to be a more time-consuming conversation that would happen in my mind after the plan is accepted.
Just to clarify, do you need to pick, like, is the grant money to do all of these projects, or do we get the grant money and we do some of them, but you need to tell them which projects before you apply?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so I think that's
And,
where maybe I would feel more comfortable if we had some.
Totally.
Yeah,
For this upcoming grant round, with the understanding that as every
Like, how
grant
much
comes
money
up,
is it?
they have different criteria and different goals, and, you know, some are focused on safety around schools, and so what we apply for each round, but we can come up with for this round what the priority would be based on what we
Yeah, how
understand.
much money?
Yeah.
Do these things typically have local match?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And what we do is we go through the capital committee and have to argue for our match share because money is limited, and either we use street capital dollars or we use 20 million general obligation bond money.
You could potentially use impact.
That's what I was gonna say, particularly if we change the ordinance.
The ordinance. But
Well, if we show that it's it is going to increase usage. If you're increasing the amount of bikes and walkers in the corridor, then.
I think though that we have to change the ordinance to get there. Right? I mean,
Could we use if we get project-based tip, could we use tip money for these things too?
it depends what the project is and the area of that project. The answer is possibly yes. And to Gene's point, I think it would be clearer if we had an update to impact fees, but we already have impact fees. And if they can be consistent with the ordinances currently drafted, then that may be.
And I think we can.
Short-term strategy.
Okay, but that'd be great.
We've had conversations with our attorney's office.
There you go. You don't have to look at it for a long time.
That's
Okay.
My memos are in the file.
You still read your memos.
You know, they're still there. I hope.
You gonna close this item?
All right.
Yeah. So let's move on to recycling.
Thank you, Philip.
So Next is the future of recycling.
Yes, I put in front of you a memo that I finished today because things have been moving at warp speed since the council had its work session on the 14th. Colby, come on up. Yes, thank you.
Chairs are not comfortable.
Yeah. Well, it's also maybe the time we sit at.
Another 20 hours.
So we wanted to come to the TEUC. The interest from my seat is to try to assist in shepherd a conversation and ultimately a decision about future direction of recycling. As the longer this continues, the greater stress it puts on our workforce. And I am desiring to try to give the council some actionable proposed direction in the short, medium, and long term in how to navigate the process. And you'll see in the memo kind of the follow-up of what we've done since the work session on the 14th. I won't go through all that on the first page. But headed to the second page is where I've tried to lay out the short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies. Where the short term, I would like the council to be ready to consider an MOA with the union, a memorandum of agreement with the union on premiums to help recruit and retain our team for the next 6 to 8 months while we're trying to preserve this operation with a very stressed team. And I lay out what the premiums are here. They've been discussed with the union. They've been discussed with the administration. I believe that it's the right mix of approach to get us through a place where we have a good chance of retaining our team and hopefully attracting more folks. The goal, if you like this general direction, would be to bring an MOA to the council on the 12th of May. That would enable us to put these premiums in place on May 13th. Then the medium-term strategy, we would like your support for putting out a request for price quotes under this new personnel policy. It's called an RFPQ for haulers to bid for a 3 to 5 year contracted operation. And you'll see that I've listed in here that in parallel, there were a number of questions at the council meeting about how much will this cost? And what would it cost if the city kept it? To how much would it cost for the private haulers? We don't know until we bid it. So the concept is let's bid it and look. And our proposal here is simultaneously we'll map out if we were to continue doing this, here's the fully all-in costs. So you have a comparison to the bids that we get in. And then long-term, hearing, Councilor Bergman and others' interest in a robust multi-stakeholder conversation about the future of consolidated collection without biasing how that consolidated collection would happen. I am proposing that we, as time allows, initiate that robust planning process. And that we would bring to the full council by this fall, a scope, a budget, and a timeline for doing that long-term work. I flesh out in the context that we really are at a crisis point. Staff, as we've met multiple times with the staff, is maxed out. We're 1 out of 4 people in the recycling positions. That one person is looking for other work. To fully staff recycling, we probably need 6 or 7 folks. We have 1. The folks who are covering are burnt out and frustrated. And if we lose them, we can't replace sidewalk, we can't replace sewer main, we can't plow streets. We are in a crisis of even greater proportions. So I'm hoping to work cooperatively with you to come up with, some short, medium, and long-term approaches here. And I've given a sample motion at the end of my memo that kind of helps frame the council's kind of guidance on the short, medium, and long-term strategies here. And with that, we're here to answer questions, Lee and myself and Colby. And we certainly want, Colby to have an opportunity today and in front of the council on the 28th to be able to speak to the union issues directly if friendly to the council.
So can I, before we get into this?
Yeah.
There's 3 different motions here. And it seems like the one that's most time sensitive is the first one, correct? That's the one you want to get before the council, but the other ones, we've heard a lot of good questions from the public. I've asked questions that you answered today on the sort of the medium and long term. I still have questions about the cost of recycling, whether or not with premiums and more competitive pricing, we could actually staff it, and would that eliminate a lot of the issues? Former Councilor Busher had mentioned that, like, I don't know, and I want to substantiate some of these claims and questions, and questions that have been asked before we get further down the path on some of these other things. But so that's my long-winded way of saying, can we maybe decouple this and take one of the actions tonight and take other actions at future meetings? And I'll open up to the council, but that's sort of the direction I'm leaning. I think we need more information on some of these things that have been raised and questions that have been asked of the current program before we say, yeah, we're gonna go bid it out. We can't fix it. And so I'm just gonna put it out there, but in the short term, I'll tell you right out of the gate, whatever you need to do to staff this service that we've heard almost universally is highly valued by residents of Burlington.
Yeah.
I'd like to support that effort. That's what. But I'm sorry, I preempted everybody else, but I just wanted to make sure we could decouple these things, right? But I'll open up to the committee.
I have a question of information.
Sure.
And that is, what did you say that would bring in the fall of 2025?
I was proposing that, if you look at the last page 3.
Yep.
Under the motions.
Yep.
I was proposing to have the council under the 3rd bullet, request the TEUC work with the city staff to develop a plan, a timeline, and a budget to evaluate a potential transition to a fully consolidated solid waste collection system and provide the proposed plan back to city council by October 2025. My thought was that we needed collectively time together to talk about what the frame of it is, how we approach it, and make sure that the council buys into it. So whatever comes back hopefully has the support of the council on the backside.
Great, and just to be clear, that is also on page 2 when it says long term.
Yeah, it just didn't have the date.
Yeah, no, I got that. That's right. I just wanted to make sure that I got that right.
Yep.
I would love to hear Colby, and and you've seen this came late, so the memo, and for you to talk about the position of your members in relationship to what we're being asked.
Absolutely. So hi, everybody. My name is Colby Dallaire. I'm the ASME Local 1343 president for the city of Burlington and et cetera, a lot of other towns as well. So the recycling program, when it is fully operational, has 4 union positions full-time. Currently there is 1 recycler. That has happened perpetually through attrition of the recycling program being an entry-level position. We've had some long-term employees in recycling, but for the most part, I would say that holistically, the recycling program has been the way you get your foot in the door, the way you get your commercial driver's license, and the way that you start your career in the city. We have a lot of people throughout the city in water, staying in public works all over the city who have gotten their start in the recycling. If it was sustainable, I absolutely would be advocating to keep it. What I believe I am seeing is that it is only my personal opinion that the workforce change has facilitated that we are not getting the new hires in the door for that position. What we have seen over the last year or so is that We had 3 positions and we're really struggling to fill the 4th. We had 3, 1 has moved over to right of way field technician for the street department. 1 has moved to a position in the garage maintenance, also in the public works kind of umbrella. And when those requisitions have been put out, they've just yielded no applicants. No applicants that we were even, well, I mean, no applicants, period, but then no applicants, even if we got them, that we would be willing to train. Because ideally you want someone to come in with a commercial driver's license from the gate, which we have not seen since COVID. What has ended up happening, just like myself, I work for, when I'm not the president, I work for Public Works in the traffic department, and I fix traffic signals in the city. And so I came in without a commercial driver's license, and the city facilitated me getting that. I came from telecommunications, but I didn't require a CDL. So to come into the city, we, in the past, as an employer, have kind of said, hey, we'd really like you to have that. And so the recycling program has been a great way to get your foot in the door, get your CDL, establish yourself and your brand as an employee, and then move on. But we are not getting those new hires in the door. That is even after some pretty lucrative incentives to try and beat back this flame. And so what in the past has been done is recycling has been added to the right way street maintenance workers job description to help fill in when there was a gap. That gap has now become the full time. And so the right of way field technicians have been filling in as per was the agreement, but now they are at a crisis point, and I would not use that lightly. We have had 3 in the last month seek employment elsewhere, not entirely because of recycling, but a large percentage because they're the lower end in the seniority list, so they would be going out recycling more often. There is a pretty fair rotation, but a lot of these things, that's where it comes to. So we are open for right-of-way field technicians, and we are open for recycling. And so that has created this perfect storm of burnout that we just cannot sustain. That's kind of the high-level back end of how we've gotten here. It's not through mismanagement. It's not because the city isn't a great place to work. I'm very proud of the work that I do, that our other employees do. I am not advocating that we get rid of recycling. I'm requesting help for our union employees and our employees in general, whether they're union or not, because we all work together to pull some of this burden off from them. It really is, I believe, Gene, when we had our meeting and Merrick as well, and Joe was there. It was I called it a meat grinder. It truly is. You are on your feet for 8 to 10 hours. It is physically demanding work, and that's after Chapin has gone to the toters. And after we've made some kind of, I guess I'd call them body mechanics upgrades to try and stem the kind of repetitive motion injuries that you'd have even if you did everything right and you stacked everything, you're still going to, because your body's not meant to do those repetitive motions for that long. So I just need to be very clear that the union is not advocating to get rid of recycling. We are requesting that the entire program get on a more stable footing. And if the funding was there and this could be moved away from the street department, because now the street department has become the recyclers, which, we're talking about, I'm, in the back of the room listening, and we're talking about sidewalk improvements that desperately need to get done. Those things are not happening when we are supposed to be staffed at 16 or 17 at this point.
16, we're currently at 13. We have 2 people retiring in June and July.
That would bring us down to 11. We fill in 2 to 3 people a day for recycling. Takes a crew of 8 to do sidewalks, 4 to pole, 4 to pour. Then you have 4 on basins, you have 2 on potholes, 1 in each sweeper. We just don't have enough people to get out there and do the work we need to do to maintain the right of way and recycle at the same time.
And so it's just staffing challenges, and to a certain extent, we'll always be in flux. We'll always have job openings, hopefully, in the city, but we're at something of a perfect storm. And so for the union standpoint, I'm not coming to you asking for recycling to go away, and I need to be very clear about that. What I'm saying is, can we work to put this on a stable footing? And I'm fully supportive of solid waste and compost. I think there's great things that can be done there. Those would be great union jobs, but it is my opinion as the union president of the local that they cannot stay with the street department at this time, and really should be stood up on their own. My concern is the morale within the street department. There was a meeting this morning rolling out the potential of these incentives just to try and get a temperature of the room. And the overall message that we received, there were some really good meetings that we had about trying to roll out these incentives. And I frankly can tell you that the overall sort of temperature we got was very chilly. If it was $10 more an hour, they still do not want to recycle. They have a lot of pride for working for the city and the things that they do, and they see a lot of value in the recycling program. They just would like also to have it on a stable footing out of another department. And so I did listen to the retired councilor Sharon Busher. I respect everything she was saying, but there isn't a soldiering on at this point. My fear is that we're going to lose the institutional knowledge from the people who should have another 10 to 12 years here, who know where the manholes are, who know where, how to do this work. And we're already behind in the number of right-of-way street technicians that we have. The morale is very low. They have been soldiering on for a while, kind of waiting for something to happen. And I can tell you that it's very low. The incentives, if they're able to be passed, are great. And I think I still have some reservations, no matter what the price amount, to get us to the end of the year. I think it's doable. I do not think it is sustainable. Money, as everybody here knows, is a short-term motivator, not a long-term motivator. And the city doesn't have a lot of it. So in the short term, I think it's what I would be recommending. I'm not excited about losing any union jobs. I need to be very clear about that. All of the things that have come up in the last meetings and the conversations I've had with a number of people. But frankly, we can't fill them. And the one recycler we do have is a constant loyal employee with a great attitude. And he has left recycling once before and come back. Kind of considers it his home, I would say, and he is not. He's, even the incentives today, he was like, I'm burned out, because he's having to work harder just to maintain at the job he's at. And so he's applied for a handful of jobs. I've helped facilitate conversations with other department heads, kind of going, hey, this is this job, and they have an opening. Let's introduce you before you even apply and see if this is a great fit. And so, myself and the chapter chair for the union have done that, and on a number of different jobs. I have mixed feelings about that, because I'm not trying to take our one recycler away, but those are opportunities for him as well, for him to also grow like everybody else has. And so I don't want to get rid of recycling. I wanna see it actually prosper, but to do that, it has to be put somewhere else. And we do need to act on that because I'm fearful that we're gonna lose our street maintenance workers, we've already lost some, but at a larger alarming rate. They are at a crisis point at this point. That was clear this morning in that meeting. Gene, when I was on the phone with you earlier, I was like, hey, we were all chased out of that room. Because they've about had it with recycling, just because of the physical toll. They are all supportive of recycling. That, needs to be heard. Everybody, it's a no-brainer that recycling is a very important thing. I'm not suggesting that we put it out to the private market. I'm just requesting that it gets put somewhere and stabilized, not with the street department. And if that takes time, that's where we can be as supportive as we can. My concern is for the membership and the membership not having to endure. So I apologize for a long-winded sort of response, but I wanted to make sure it was abundantly clear that everybody's in support of recycling. And if we were able to staff this would not be such a problem that is taking up so much city time.
That was helpful.
Can I just as a follow-up on this, just to, so it sounds to me that the union at this point in time, even knowing the concerns of the members, would be supportive of a memorandum of understanding that, or agreement that would raise the wages, looking to this gap, that this proposal through the end of the year. Is that it?
Through the end of the year,
Yeah,
I would say, looking at the other side of the room, the end of the year is. They need to see some sort of timeline, because originally, months ago, there was a thought of the end of the summer because we were months out. But nothing was in stone. It was all, gee, if we can't get this staff, because it's not like one day everybody just said, let's stop recycling.
Okay.
It was more, gee, we're having a really hard time here doing this. And the staff said, okay, we'll shoulder this burden and also plow.
Sure, I
Because
got
that whole thing with plowing when at the last meeting, I do that too. I spend a lot of time here at 1 and 2 in the morning. Well, not here, but out there. And it is for some of those guys. It's a group effort to keep the streets clear, and then I'll start my day over in the traffic department, and I'll watch them walk across the lot to get to the recycling truck, and you don't even want to wave because they're hoping to go home and now they're having to stay. So it's been a burden that's been shouldered for a while, and I think that's that, not hidden part, but I think the explanation has not kind of been fleshed out of absolutely nobody is looking to get rid of this program. We're just finding ourselves in a place where it is no longer sustainable the way it has been. And we're just wondering where that able-bodied workforce is that wants these good union jobs. And we're just not seeing them.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Colby. It's nice to meet you. I haven't met you yet. And I mean, I just want to start out with saying, like, I have so much support and appreciation for all the folks that are out there doing this work, and clearly we need to fix this. And so just heard on that. I think, my head has really been spinning on recycling overall. And I am aligned with Councilor Barlow and thinking like, let's get this first part approved. But I really think we need to pause and like actually confront this before we go into, contracting this out, because there's just so many things to unpack. It's like, okay, are we gonna move to a different department? What would that look like? I'm wondering what do other cities do? Like, where are they recruiting from? And how can we learn from that? And, do we need to restructure the positions so that maybe they're not all entry level, so there's like a seniority there so that you could stay within recycling and kind of move up and have ownership there. You know, those are all things, those are big conversations to have. And I'm also just a little bit scratching my head, and this is not said in a way to like blame anybody, but I really wish we had heard about this earlier, because it feels like this crisis is really bad. And, you know, maybe we should have been talking about this 6 or 9 months ago. And I have no idea, I'm sure you all were, but, you know, like from the sidewalk repair to this, like, this is really bad. And I think we need to be having these conversations, you know, earlier along that timeline. And, you know, it kind of came to the council at first as a budgetary request, and it really goes way beyond that. It's really more of a systemic issue. And so I think my request, you know, really mostly to Chapin moving forward is like, let's please talk about this sooner if we can. You know, I know you all can't always do that, but you know, when I compare this to our recent conversation about, I know it's not the same, but about like the water bond, you know, we had such a long process to do a big new thing for that. And you know, I think all of us at this table are really still just learning about, you know, how recycling even works here and what our potential pathways might be. So I personally need a lot more time to really get into those conversations and make sure we can just see if we can build something that will work sustainably, as you're saying, and will not, you know, make people miserable at their jobs. We want people to be happy at their jobs and be fulfilled. And you know, maybe we'll look into this and we'll find out that's not possible. I mean, that would really be too bad, but I think we really gotta try our best to fix this and see what it will cost and see what the timelines are. But that's where I'm at right now. I'm really not ready to move forward on the second two parts of this motion, although generally I do support the idea of a consolidated waste collection system. But I am supportive of moving forward on the memorandum of agreement.
The union is as well supportive of the consolidation of, you know, the three, recycling, solid waste, and compost. I actually, when, you know, we had kind of an informational session, my chapter chair, Scott, who's my working foreperson, I was, you know, he's been with the city over 20 years, and he was like, our private conversation after that was like him saying, gee, I can see my last 5 years here kind of building with that. You know, I'd be very excited about that. And we had a lot of, you know, just really good discussions between Scott and I about, you know, like we talked about with compost, you know, where I was like, hey, you could do this here and you could do this here. Those are all great things. I think there is a future for that, as long as, like we had in our private, you know, separate discussion, kind of outlining, hey, this is where we're at, was just, where does that financially, where does that money come from to try and not only continue to fund this sort of public good, because it is, but where does that money come from? How is it sustainable? And I think really, I looked at Gene and said, and don't say grant funding, you know, because it just doesn't, and that's the problem. It's very much like your separate conversation. A lot of, for my department, if you want to see a new intersection, it has to come from grants. We are banjo string tight on our budget. And so because of that, we've tried to work through some ideas of other departments voluntarily sending people to help relieve in the recycling role, but my department has 5 people if we're fully staffed to try and maintain everything out on the street. So we just, you know, we're putting out fires as it is. We don't get to, you know, during the regular workday, we just don't have it in our staffing, and the water department would be the same, parks would be the same. And a lot of that other staffing just doesn't have a CDL because it's not required in their job to have that. So I would most certainly, you know, as had been expressed with Gene, Merrick, and Joe, love to see some momentum, you know, some movement in the planning on that and where that funding could come from. We're just, at this point, you know, I apologize on behalf of everybody that we've gotten to this point. But I, you know, am all but pleading for some sort of, you know, momentary relief and some sort of timeline that we can get to. Because short of that, you know, from the union side, I'm all but gonna have a mutiny. You know, because they are at, you know, at that point today was kind of, our first thing in the morning meeting was to try and say, hey, here's everything we're doing. And short of, you know, not stopping recycling, stopping their participation in recycling, is it, you know, I would say that the word I used in our meeting was betrayal. They just kind of feel like at this point, it went from being something where they were happy to help out to you are now, you know, and it's not their job.
And so can I just a quick follow-up?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I'm supportive of moving forward with what you need to stop the mutiny, so to speak, but I guess I'm just wondering, is that gonna be enough? Like, if it was a frigid, I mean, I'm not trying to spend more money, but if it was a frigid reception and this is gonna be another crisis in 6 weeks from now, I think we gotta be real about that. And so.
I would say, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off at all. I would say that, if I'm being real with you, it doesn't matter if it's $4, it's $10, the monetary, they are at the point where it's hard on a body, and it's the summertime. The street department is coming out of, what are called winter operations in our, CBA, our contract, which, forbeys is not the right word, but makes it hard for them to take time off because of the, you know, just the climate of winter, trying to figure out when to, you know, my wife is like, you know, what are you doing? And I have the Church Street Marketplace, you know, camera, and I'm looking at the weather and going, should I go to sleep at 7 or can I push it till 9, you know, to try and get enough hours to be safe on the road if we get called in at 2 to plow, you know, sort of thing. So coming out of those winter rules, a lot of people take their vacations in the summer in the street department, but now being 3 people down, having to full-time recycle, we're just getting to a perfect storm of, you know, we're not getting to the other shovel-ready projects. And they are ready to work. But at the end of the day, you're exhausted when you get off that truck. And so it's tough. They're kind of going, hey, I've spent all winter exhausted. And it's, I think, sometimes hard for them to put into words, but they've spent all winter exhausted, you know, pushing it to the limit. And now we're coming into summer and we're asking them to continue to do that.
So I have just a few questions about this. So it's like, if we can't hire for recycling, I mean, compost collection, where you don't even have like toters and things, you have to get out. And that's the thing, we got rid of the bins because people had to get out and pick things up. And that's what compost collection is by and large that I've seen around the city. And trash is the same. So if we can't hire for recycling, I don't know why we think we'd be able to hire for these other sort of related functions. And I'm wondering, it's like, it seems to me, it's like, well, the issue here is, it's like we have people that are doing recycling that weren't hired to do recycling, don't want to do recycling. And so, like, if you had another department, it was the recycling department that was different than the street department, not necessarily an enterprise fund, but its own entity within DPW, that's what those people did. That was their job. It seemed like it would be different, because now all of a sudden it's not this extra drudgery that you get like, you know, sent to. It's your job. And maybe a structure in a way within, maybe, and it costs more, it probably costs more because you can't sort of like share resources like doing that. But we know that people are hiring for this. We have haulers around the city that are hired to have people. I don't have any idea what the turnover is on those jobs. It may be high. I don't know. But a couple of questions I had is, like in terms of like in the short term, besides the monetary sort of premium, could we do things like go to bi-weekly or something instead of weekly? We had that, you know, sometimes when the equipment's not working, we don't have it every week.
That's another thing, we're down with 3 trucks.
And so there's that, and I have questions about the truck that are unrelated to the union, but.
Yeah.
And then like how many people are there on a recycling truck? It sounds like there's one.
1 to 2 or 2.
Right, but if there's two, it's probably less. It's, you know, each company while you're doing it, you can sort of trade off, you're not like a duh person the whole time. So maybe that's another thing we need to look at. I think it used to be 2, didn't it, always? And now never?
It's always been up until we hired the 4th, that was just supposed to be that little bit of redundancy to fill in for when people take vacations or they call in sick.
It was structured
always
to have 3
3.
routes.
3 routes, 3 trucks, 1 operator per truck.
But having staff, if you need 3 people, you need to have 4 to 6, because what ends up happening is
Right.
somebody gets hurt, somebody's
Yeah.
sick. You know, those sorts of things. No, you have valid points. That was, I mean, we had kind of a informational kind of side meeting before the last city council meeting, where we were just going over that. They did kind of have their own department. They were piggybacking the same manager as the street department. They were a subset of the street department. Would that be an accurate sort of statement? And there were 4.
They're a program within the maintenance division.
Yeah.
Equipment maintenance, street maintenance and recycling.
And so they kind of had that, but they didn't have their own manager. They didn't have their own working 4 person. They just, you know, had the 4. And then when they were fully staffed, if they had the 4 and there are 3 routes, and the 4th was on vacation and the 3rd got sick, you could request 1 out of the street department. And you had, if the street department was fully staffed, spin that wheel, you got a 1 in 16 chance. And that's sustainable. What has happened is we can't fill those 3 positions, which that stress has put the 4th person in the point where he's like, hey, this isn't working. And now we've been putting 2 people in a truck to try and make it more tenable, but with less staff, that creates an even bigger shortage.
Right.
So they would split half and half, where they would drive for half the day, get out and bring the toter over, and then they'd switch. So it wasn't such a physically demanding sort of job for the day. But we're just at a point where we don't have the staff. We're unable to fill it.
And then the other question I guess I have is like, I'm curious about what the cost would be for this. So like, if you want this idea of trying to cost it out with private haulers, concurrent with that, I would, you know, like to understand what it would cost us to do the same thing, you know?
That's what we're
And like,
proposing.
to build it out, right, to build it out, like not.
We're gonna
to
give you
not-
the fully loaded cost, compare it to whatever's bid coming.
But it seems like like this issue with, in the short term, we gotta address this. Regardless of what, I guess this could be a year out, you know? Even
There
though,
are multiple confluences of issues that have come landing here.
And from my perspective, I need the right of way field technicians in the street department to have heard me say out loud to counselors, that is recorded, that they can see that we are requesting help.
So-
I mean, I got other things to say because I was asked the question.
Okay. So, before we chatted, I made my opinions known on this multiple times in public comment and in private comments with people. I agree with the union's proposed solution of, yes, we need to keep recycling, but yes, it needs to be spun off of streets. And I raised that point at the council meeting. And it seems that the response to my comments during the council meeting is that we're not seeing the number of applicants that would make a decoupling and quickly staffing up tenable. But to Councilor Barlow's point, how can these private haulers hire these people? It could be that there's just massive turnover, but they're still hiring people and we're not hiring people. Is the problem for someone who wants to haul recycling? I don't know if that person exists. I assume they do. That the fact that it is coupled to all these other roles, is that why we can't hire someone to just do the recycling and that we need to spin it off into its own dedicated thing? Kind of like the opposite of what the street maintenance team is complaining about, that they don't want to haul recycling, they were hired to do something else. Do we need to put this up as a position where you're just hired to do the recycling? Are we talking about like two different types of people that we're trying to reach here? I think that those discussions need to happen and I want that information in front of me before I can support putting our program out to bid, along with the reasons that Councilor McKnight and Councilor Barlow have already said. And then just, I have a question. You said that your team was originally, or the streets team that you're president of, obviously, that was told that at some earlier date that there would be a promise of relief by the summer. When were you told that?
So, that's a really good point. So we were down one recycler. And so the other two recyclers were like, hey, it's getting a little hairy out there. The streets team was going, hey, we're trying to hire this. The rec was open for quite some time with no applicants, right? Literally no applicants. And so then what ended up happening was, I believe, and make sure I'm correct on this, the amount was moved up. Am I right on the timeline on that? So I'm being accurate.
The amount was moved up.
For the recycling position? Was it at that time?
The full time,
Yeah,
not this past summer. no.
okay, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make sure that my timeline is correct. So it was brought to them with, we're trying to work on a solution. What that solution was kind of ambiguous. There was no like grand plan to either remove it or move it to another department. They were just trying to fill it at that point. And so when that happened, they were like, okay, we'll give you some time. And the right-of-way street maintenance workers were like, we'll continue to shoulder some of this burden. And so they are remembering from that point last summer where it was like, just keep maintaining. So I apologize, I didn't mean to make it sound like this was some sort of like grand plan over a long period of time. It was more just we noticed a while back we couldn't hire, and it wasn't for a lack of trying. We were trying to steer people towards that open requisition for a good paying union job. Just people were not hitting on it. And it's crazy because I've been here 3 years, and prior to my getting here, there was a waiting list. You had to wait for someone to retire, pass away, the council to approve more funds to make another person something to get a job. And now we pay well and we are a good employer. Our healthcare insurance is great. I love it here in the city. I wouldn't represent my fellow employees, otherwise. This is a great place to work. And we're not paying peanuts, but we still are not able to capture someone that we even partner with to help them get their CDL. There was a recent seasonal position offered, not benefits as a seasonal, just because it's so hard for $30 an hour if you have a CDL, and we're still not. My understanding is as of yesterday afternoon, to make sure that my information is correct, there were 0 applicants for that.
Is that just posted on the city's website or is there?
Social media, we put it out everywhere.
Yeah.
Rob did a good job, putting out a social media post for that, which did create, like we talked about in our meeting. I had to put out some fires for that too, and had to tell people, hey, this is a higher pay for a seasonal position without benefits. Because people just see the price tag and not, you know,
So
not that
So
other part.
here, so.
just one second, I just wanna time keep us, cause we are at like 10 of April.
Yeah, no, I
We're closing on
got
a third hour, so I wanna figure out what action.
Yes. You've got, I think, unanimity around the very short term here. I support that in case that wasn't clear, so let me add my voice for that. I really don't see, I speak to my fellow committee members, how we get to the next step that both management and labor is calling for if we do not take some sort of variant in the second medium term strategy. I just don't really see that as being a viable place. I don't like the motion because I think that it actually, for the second motion, because I don't see it as being really reflective of what your medium term strategy is on page 2. So if it's shorthand for that, then I think we want to make that's what the sort of I would say is the substitute for it. So it's clear that they're in line because it sort of just gets to part of that, but not the other 2 bullet points. So I point that out, and I think that what I've heard from folks is that in addition to what you've got on page 2 here on the second bullet point, a desire to hear what we would need to do for the city to correct the issues that have been confronted. And so as you're developing in parallel the full cost estimate, it includes any of the other intangibles, I'll call them,
Organizational.
or the recruitment, right? And then the return to the council by July to recommend awarding a contract to a private employer, or what this does is it presupposes that second bullet point is not going to come up with something that is going to keep it with the city. And so I think that come back to the council in July has got to have an assessment of the viability, and it'd be a real shot, which includes engaging with the union there, of the alternative being a city program. So that's the way that I see you get to move forward with this next step beyond there. Right now, what you've done is say, we're gonna eliminate the city program. I hear my fellow progressive saying that's a non-starter for him. I hear concerns about that from my fellow Democratic counselor over there. And I'm not sure exactly where Mark is beyond where he was at the council meeting, but I see him wanting to make sure that stuff works and that there is a real desire to keep this here. So
There's just such an information gap for us, and it pains me to hear Colby say that these were problems that were happening last summer, and as 3 of us were on the TEUC this summer, and utilities is one of our letters. It's that we couldn't be a part of that process of trying to rectify it before we've gone to what seems like an event horizon situation. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you brought me up. It's like talking about how our medium-term strategy, how out of these 3 bullet points, only one of them is reflected in the motion, and the third one is, in my opinion, like we're already just saying we're going to recommend awarding the contract to the private hauler. It's a little bit insulting, I feel like, respectfully, that I want the second point needs to be fulfilled to its fullest extent. That includes everything that we've talked about here and that Colby has brought up of what the union thinks. The union is not necessarily saying we need to privatize recycling. It's just there's multiple solutions here, and I need all of them laid out in front of us.
Gene, do you have an off-ramp for us here?
I do, I think that if we can add the generals, I don't have great language and what we need to do to correct the problems, what the city needs, where what we're looking for. I think what Merrick is saying and what Becca has said, and then the last bullet point to actually, in essence, give us the choice to lay out the fact that this is the choice in the short term. So this is different than a consolidated system. The off-ramp, I want to say that I really do think that initiating the planning process should be part of the motion as well, because it gives guidance and a future direction. And I think it is what you are looking for, which is a good conversation with facts and a planning process that includes all the right people about where the future is, and it doesn't presuppose. So
I am, but I'm also cognizant of the work you and I did at Muddy Waters a couple months ago, and we're already behind schedule on
I got that.
things that we laid out.
I understand.
So based on that, I don't know when the TEUC as a committee could take this on much before the middle or end of summer.
Oh, I think actually that the third, the long-term thing is something that is happening
Okay.
like in a year. I'm not seeing that as being immediate, because it's a big
Keep
deal.
it as an open item for
It-
now,
And
but
it says it, and
address the other
and
two.
it does say an advisory committee, so that theoretically could be an ad hoc.
It could be, and there is a plan back by October, give some framework to that we can build this in the right
Is
way.
it possible to just move forward with bullet point number 1 and come back to that?
I think that's a mistake. I think they need quicker
I think the union
action.
needs number 2.
I think that everybody needs quicker action than to do that, and I think that,
It just doesn't seem like items 2 or 3 are gonna happen quickly.
well, I think number 2 actually can happen, because they're planning on doing it, but there are these other factors that I believe should be added into that conversation, and I think that you all have the capacity
Go
to
ahead,
do
Jim.
that.
What I'm hearing is a desire to work with staff to modify the second bullet around a city bid and in the process of putting this out to bid, so that you can compare what a internally operated and run program, not set up as a full enterprise fund, because we don't have time for that, but to the best extent possible, insulating it from other portions of DPW. And that what I think we could do is I could work with you all individually, not as a quorum, to adjust the 3-point motion here to try to meet the spirit of what, I'm hearing from Merrick and Becca and Jean to allow for a city bid to happen and to not presuppose the kind of outcome of that process, and that the council would make a process in the summer that could give clear direction to staff, would still allow us to move forward with fleshing out both the city operational version and the contracting RFPQ, and get us to a place, that last bullet, if I can bring forward some of the language that said when time and resources allow, we would get to the long-term planning. I don't think that long-term planning needs to start for a couple of months. Could start in the fall, but we need to name that we are trying to fix the problem long-term.
Right, yeah.
Not just implementing a short-term.
To be clear about so my issue with the middle one is I want the city process for figuring out what our new and improved recycling and trash collection, or what recycling for now. I want that to move forward. I'm not comfortable tying that to the procurement process for contracting with an outside hauler. I would rather us just decide we are going to fix this ourselves than say, oh, we're gonna see if we can fix it, but then we're also gonna procure with contractors because we don't really think we're gonna fix it. that's what it feels like we're doing if we tie those two things together. And it feels like we're just giving ourselves an easy way out to getting rid of the union jobs. I don't think we should be even if we change the language to say we're not presupposing that, Chapin, which I appreciate that point.
Sure.
And then we could rewrite that. I think it sort of does presuppose it by putting those two things together. So I think I would rather I don't know if we break it up or just change it so that it's just DPW figuring this out. That would be my preference.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. The one piece of information that understanding what it would cost the private sector to do it, it would either validate, because I think it's gonna be a lot more expensive. That's my.
Under either scenario, this is gonna cost
I understand that.
taxpayers a lot more money.
I understand that, but I also think that, validate that we need to spend this money internally if we had like a comp to compare it to. But first and foremost, I do agree, we should understand what we think it's gonna cost internally to fix this thing in a sustainable way so that we can run this valuable program that everybody tells us is like something they can't do without. It's not I don't think it's a progressive Democrat thing. This is something that is a service that the city provides that is highly valued. And like I said to others, we spent a generation training humans to separate their waste streams. And we need to keep that up somehow, whether or not, we can fix it internally.
So I think the off-ramp
It's like a value for
Yeah, it's a value.
Burlingtonians.
It's a value.
I think the off-ramp is to have the first and second only bullet points in the medium-term strategy. I think that's really what I'm hearing, is that at this point, you're not going to recommend awarding a contract, which is the same as saying to advancing it's less than advancing a procurement process as much as it is getting that quote. And the question, of course, will be whether without there being the surety of, there being a contract at the end of this, whether anybody will respond to it or not. But I think that's what you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess my question is, understanding the integrity of staff, I take exception to the foregone conclusion if we were to put it out to bid. You can put anything out to bid and say we can have the right to reject any and all bids.
I just feel like.
If we fundamentally,
Collectively.
if we're gonna put together a plan without it being an enterprise fund in a way that doesn't eat into other divisions, this thing is gonna be expensive. And that's fine, I'm developing it, I will give it the best run I can. But to not run a bid process to understand how that compares to someone else running it, we've got a problem we have to solve now with overburdening our teams. So we need to run fast in multiple directions to get as much information as fast as we can. And I am more than happy to fully build out the city approach without an enterprise fund, see how good it can be. My thought is, if we also run a bid process, the council then has two pieces of data. You have the full city data and you have the full private sector data. And what you want to do with it is a policy choice at that point.
Right.
And
I
I'm not-
agree with that myself.
I do.
I
agree
think
with
that
too.
I think that it's important to be able to get the price quotes. So I mean, that's why I was saying that I think the off-ramp for me is the first two bullet points. Whether the decision is made in July or not is, the question. I hear the union saying, this is not tenable, so you've got to act with due speed.
Right.
I hear
And
the same with you guys.
If we get you all the data by July that is both the municipal operation and the bids, then you all have everything you need to make a decision quickly.
I think so, and I think that there's there's the money and there are the intangibles that go to how is it that, people are getting in the, why are people not coming in the door? Why were they doing it before? Mark's point about other haulers, they're staffing their trucks. So, it is.
I just worry that if you forecast out a scenario where, like Javen said, we don't have time to set up an enterprise fund. It is gonna be very expensive to do it citywide. What if it's gonna cost 4 times as much to do it ourselves than to contract it out? I think that could very well be the situation. Then if we're sitting with both of those choices right next to each other, you know, we have it's gonna be very tempting to pick the contract we have.
It might be the right choice.
And
But
that's actually right,
it
and
also-
particularly for the short
but-
term.
But
Might
then
not
you
be,
get into
right,
that and
long
then we
term.
have no
We've
recycling
got-
program.
Well, I mean,
Makes
that's
me
what,
worry.
that is, what you should be, and you are on, you know, I am on your side with that, you know, it's the song that we've been singing, which is why the third point is so important. Because what it does is it says that we will continue to look at this in the long term, and that long term is actually not all that far out. When you look at it 3 to 5 years, and so the question of how we go about doing that, if you don't do that third point, then you're right. So that's why I do think that it's important that we modify the second point, which
It's
is,
just so hard to take something back after you get.
I'm there with you, you know, like I've been fighting this fight for 5 years. You know, and I succeeded in a lot of ways, but we are not there. I mean, I'm there with you though.
If we were able to staff those positions, I have a feeling we would have come to this point at some point, just because it wasn't stood up. It was stood up as part of Lee's umbrella, but it really didn't have its own manager. It had 10 percenters, but it didn't have a working 4-person. It was stood up, did function for a long period of time, but now just the workforce does not want to sustain it. And even at a higher rate, it's tough. I don't have an answer as to why all of a sudden the applications just dried up, even as the money has increased, and we couldn't hire it full-time. So the decision was made by management to put it out as as part of their seasonal help, just to see if we could get that relief to those full-time employees, and still not, at a higher rate, still not finding it. Which alarms me, but I have a feeling that eventually we would have made it to this point. I think just not getting the requisitions and bringing the new hires got us here sooner. And it stumps everyone as to why, in such a great place to work, we're not getting.
So I'm gonna make a motion.
Okay.
I'm gonna make a, thank you, Robert, I can see that. I'm going to move that we support the first bullet on the TEUC's motion, that we modify the second one to fundamentally be the medium term strategies, bullet points 1 and 2, knowing full well that the number 2 is not just a cost, but is a full assessment of what we need to do to fix the the problems with the city running it. And that we also include the third bullet about working with city staff to evaluate a potential transition and propose basically a plan to the council by and if you want to say November of 2025.
Yeah, give us time.
What, you were in January, when January gets into silly season, but and December, yeah, I think November it makes the most sense for that. Silly season is
I know what
there you go. Yes.
Can I ask one question? Does that give you the clarity that you need to take back to?
I apologize, so your motion was to support the change in monetary
Yes.
for the short term, and then to modify point 2, I got this one, you guys have this, to modify point 2 to go till November?
No.
I apologize.
That's okay, no, that's okay, so
I was trying to say.
yeah, that's fine, to put out a request for price quotes to area haulers in May for a 3 to 5 year contracted operation. And also to develop in parallel with that a cost estimate of and other estimates of what it would cost to operate the program by DPW.
In a sustainable way.
Understood, so giving both of those options that we discussed.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the third point is to then also support us working with staff to develop the long-term vision that would include the possibility of a consolidated fully full solid waste and the choice of it being a municipal or a private system, so that we sort of like build out what those options would be, but then that is a longer term process.
That's not something we'd be
Something
dealing with tonight. Just do this first.
I think that we should just get that, my motion is, I think it makes most sense to like do this, get that done. And then we get to focus on the medium term and we get back a plan and we work with them in the fall and we see where it goes.
I just don't know what the timeline is on that.
The November is when you get that back.
I'm talking about the point number
2.
The third, are we, on the motion, there's a third bullet.
The third bullet is to come back with a proposal to the council in November, which would
On a
be
fully consolidated production?
no, just
On
a plan,
framework
a
for the plan.
timeline.
Okay, I'm with you.
Concept of
I'm-
plan.
I'm there.
I knew you.
So Gene's motion is really to keep bullets 1 and 3 under the TEUC with the only change of changing October to November. And then the second bullet of the motion is on page 2. Under medium term, the top 2 bullets with minor changes. And Gene proposes to keep the first bullet the same and the second bullet to be developed in parallel, the full cost estimate and operational adjustments of what it would need to operate the recycling program by DPW staff.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing your motion to be.
You've heard it correctly.
Okay, great. Staff is supportive of that direction. I think the one piece that we'll just need to lay out is that it doesn't talk about the council then with the information for that second bullet in the medium term, making a decision in prompt fashion. I think whatever direction we go, we need to make a prompt decision. I will just frame that in the memo if that's the need and that's staff's expectation, so that we don't spend any further time here. But we can't dawdle on this.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second? Any discussion? Any more discussion, I should say. Saying none, we'll go to, I know, Merrick, you look like you're not sure.
I am.
Do you have questions?
And it's okay to vote no.
It's okay to vote.
It's okay to vote no.
I'm just like, I'm just like hearing what Colby said, it's about these problems happening earlier and then seeing what the original form of this medium term strategy. I'm disappointed that we didn't talk about this earlier. I remember an email from the mayor's administration coming out months ago talking about modern gov, and I know we got a presentation about it at some point saying that this was on the table. And I'm just thinking back about the fact that I had made noise about this earlier, not in this committee, but I think it's dangerous to put out private quotes, and we talked about this, we rose that point. I think that we should be moving to look at what it would take for the city to keep this program with the with the assistance of the union providing what their needs are and what that looks like. So I do support that, and I think that should be the correct medium-term strategy. I hear the desire for a comparison to be made. I worry that putting that comparison out, there's a lot of nuance, and respectfully to former Councilor Busher talking about taxes and solid waste tax. Well, taxes are not the only expense that shows up at your mail on the first day of the month. Your new private recycling expenses, I know it'll still be attached to the taxes in this current plan, medium-term plan, but if we go into a long-term fully consolidated private system, well, then there's your expense. It may not be your tax anymore, but there's your expense. So I worry about us going down the private path at all, so I will respectfully vote no on this.
Okay, so any other discussion? Okay, let's take it to a vote then. All those in favor of the motion, Councilor Bergman, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against?
No.
And let the record show the correct vote.
I share Merrick's
Yeah, I do too.
concerns and stuff. I just want us to move forward, and I think you hear the caveats that we bring to how we do that.
So did I understand that passed, but with reservations about the private hauling bid process, and it's not a foregone conclusion, and staff will do our due diligence to make sure both options are fully vetted.
Okay. Well, thank you for that discussion, and thank you both for coming and giving us that other information, which I didn't have before tonight.
And Chair, may I just say, I would love to follow up with some councilors tonight who have talked about the frustration of not communicating. Because I feel like we, over 3 to 5 years, have communicated multiple times with different councils. Yes, we manage and solve problems every day that you all know nothing about. And we do a damn good job, and we have saved so many problems from coming to you. I didn't want to have to come to you with this problem. Frankly, we have done a great job every day of solving issues when we didn't have enough people to plow one night. We figure stuff out on the fly. I'm sorry that some of you feel blindsided about this, but man, I tell you, this team works hard for you, and to try to stand up yet a wider business with few resources, we're walking a tightrope every day. People are stressed out. So please give us a little consideration when you feel like we're not communicating, because we are running in the background to keep this system going.
Thank you, Chief. I know you all were very hard at DPW, and you're throwing lots of curveballs as a matter of.
We are under-resourced,
and
then asked to do more than we have capability to do, and we try our best.
Of course you do, and the crisis, frustration is, I know a lot of it falls on your team, but it's not necessarily, I'm not necessarily criticizing you and your team for that. I think there's a lot of other factors at play that we all need to look at to understand that better and to support you all better. So I think it goes both ways, because
I appreciate
we
that.
see the work that is being done here, and it's so valued, so please know that.
And look at us as a resource for you.
Yeah, we want to help.
Not necessarily. Just
We will keep trying to share everything, but also at times yes, I want you to just know that we're trying to solve problems so you don't have to deal with them. And sometimes it just gets to the point where you have to deal with them because we can't solve them internally, and this was one that came that way.
I'm not one to agree with Chapin, or give him due. But I will say that from the union standpoint, there is a concern with a very limited budget. Just knowing that there is only so much money, and that if we go, I would love, and that was our discussion when we were just kind of having a Q&A. I would love to find that financing. I mean, it was just like when Philip was here. You know, it's every time we put up a new RFP, paint an intersection, any of that, it's, we're pulling from somewhere to put it somewhere, you know, and people go, won't you put a new something somewhere? And we go, would love to, would absolutely love to, but we are running on we reuse everything, reuse, recycle, you know, down in our shop where, you know, something comes down, Main and Pine is, the construction for the new intersection's coming. And we've gone out twice to tell the contractor we want everything, including the cable in the ground that I put, in the ground 2 years ago when they cut it, in an emergency because we could reuse that. So I mean, literally, you know, recycling even our infrastructure, you know, we're gonna take that cabinet I put in 2 years ago and we're probably gonna go put it on Battery Street. You know, so these things don't end up in the landfill, they get used probably longer than they should. And my concern is if it comes to a point where that money has to get taken from another department, as Chapin said, that it goes out of another union job, and that becomes our concern, and so it's, you know, I wanna stand up that whole process, and I feel like there's a future there, but in the short term, how do we not lose our institutional knowledge, and how do we continue to operate in that short term, so. And thank you for being able to hear.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna use the prerogative of the chair, the little room on the carrying trail. So try to move us along because I'd like to get out of here, right?
Yeah, I think we could do that.
Okay, so next on our agenda is new committee meeting schedule. So we typically have met the fourth Tuesday of the month. We pulled it back a half an hour this evening. So do we want, you know, what are folks' feelings about meeting on the fourth Tuesday at 5? Is there a desire for a different meeting time? And normally that's, you know, we normally don't go 3 hours. We routinely will go 2, but we rarely.
I was wondering.
We really don't.
I mean, I will say I've noticed the past 2 meetings that, you know, Charles has to run out and we kind of need him sometimes a little longer. So just based on that and as many of you know, I have a philosophy that meetings should not just be at night. They should sometimes be either in the morning or midday. I would love to see us go to maybe alternate. Maybe we keep it the same Tuesday, the fourth Tuesday, but alternate time.
Could we go?
I don't know how that is.
Yeah. I don't know.
You
During the middle of the
maybe
day,
like
early
have
morning works for us.
dinner with your family sometimes.
What about Mary and Jane? I'm sort of flexible.
I'll be flexible until August when I start classes again. I don't know what my classes look like yet. So I'm fine with us trialing this during the summer. It might have to change when we get to the fall though.
I'm good with the fourth Tuesday. I'm good with a daytime and the 5 o'clock. I'm also open, and here I'll throw something in to having a second meeting. If we have enough work to do, I hate to add that, but but there is a lot of important stuff that's happening, and I don't really think that we abuse time. You know, I went over on too long.
No, I don't think we do.
This sounds an important discussion.
Yeah, I mean,
I am not in favor of meaningless meeting talk, and tonight to not feel like that to me. I will say if we went to, I think my preference would be if we need extra meetings, we schedule them just like as needed.
Yeah.
And if we do have more than one meeting a month, I definitely need some meetings to be during the day. Just to
I'm good.
it sounds like everybody is okay with.
I'm totally good with that. My schedule in Holland is going to change because school is going to be over, so I'll not be going down. And then it's the school days are going to change to a Monday and Tuesday for me going down, but it'll be off council meetings. So that's all by saying I'll have a lot of flexibility.
Do folks want to meet a little bit earlier than 5? I mean, because if staff can, if we would be, maybe we could meet at 4.
So for me, the 2:30 to 4:30 window is not doable because kid pickup
Yeah.
and husband went home
Yeah.
situation. But I would maybe for the 27th, which is the next fourth Tuesday, we do noon. And look at that and just decide it right now. That I think,
What do you think about noon for next
or I
month?
could do 10.
I really been wanting to go before noon.
Somewhere between my house and here, I have left my telephone, which has my calendar. So hopefully it's in my car.
Yeah.
I'm worried about that for 3 hours.
Is noon work
So
for
it's,
staff?
so that's a way of saying that works for me and
The office or the meeting space bill?
See,
This is noon in May. On the
Yeah.
noon on the 27th is available in this room.
noon.
And that is immediately after Memorial Day, so just so
Oh.
folks are aware, that's right after a 3-day weekend.
Which means.
And just to be, I'm actually
Means
gonna
we'll
be,
get the packet out on
I'm gonna be
Thursday.
out of the country. And from the 21st to the 29th, but you should hold the meeting without me. Exactly.
Redundancy, like we were talking about
Exactly.
before.
Going to Sardinia with that Charlie Nardozzi garden tour.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sardinia.
we can talk about that at the conclusion of our meeting. I'd like to know more about it. The Sardinian garden tour.
Yeah, Charlie Nardozzi. It's this,
Okay, so
this is my
noon-
marriage. You know,
noon on the
marriage
27th.
anniversary.
Okay, done. Director's report,
We will talk next time.
Councilor Items.
I will put on for another time
Let's just have that.
the covered bike for the, yes.
Valet bike parking.
What?
Yeah, we can do it for next.
We can do it next time. Local Motion is looking for some ways that they can get support to have a secure bike facility at the farmer's market. And
We're trying to solve this at the staff level, so this gives us time and hopefully by
Cool.
next month, you won't have to meet about it.
cool.
Okay,
And yeah, I mean, I
so maybe
was,
you can update us next month.
yeah, and to the extent in terms of money, there is some money in the I like that, in the council initiative funds. We have, we use that for TDM in the on North Michigan Avenue. So there might be, if you're looking to solve that in the staff
If you're
ways,
willing.
I would be willing to for a really, important
Okay,
TDM approach to try
Thank you.
to get them there.
okay.
I don't know, not the pull. Yeah. Well, there you have it. I guess there is
Thank you.
We've already identified our next meeting, so with no further business on German City. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
And if you want to meet
Thank you all.
to
Yeah.
get our.
Thanks.
Welcome to your first meeting.
Buckle up, baby.
Well, because it seems like we're gonna take the plan, we're gonna hear about tonight.
Thank you, yeah.